Okay, shall we start this morning's session? So apologies for my croaky voice this morning, but it's been quite a good week. So good morning and welcome to this quarter's member seminar. And Adam, thank you for joining us too. I don't know if you just want to switch off your camera for a moment until a little bit later on in the morning. And we have got a great lineup for you this morning, as we are going to be shining a spotlight on the operational aspects of the contact center and exploring the current challenges, giving you a real chance to interact within each session. So in a moment, Stephen Yap, our research director, will share the latest insights from our research programs. And then I'll be talking to Sharon Ole from Sage about what they're doing and how they're adapting to the future after a fabulous evening for them at the UK National Contact Centre Awards on Monday night. We'll then have a short break, and then Kate Palmer from Peninsula, she's the HR Advice and Consultancy Director at Peninsula. She'll be here talking about questions, taking your questions as we talk about vaccinations and testing, the end of furlough and resizing, flexible and hybrid working, and also recruitment, and especially the challenges around recruitment. And I'm delighted that Adam will be back on screen a little bit later. He's joining us from Citrix, here to share his advice on how technology can be used to create a great advisor experience. And then at the end of this morning at around 11:45, Stephen Yap is going to be hosting the panel debate. And he's got Sandra Scott, the HR business partner at Bupa, John Devlin, the CEO of Ascensos, and Paul Pember, head of customer service at Camden Council, joining him. And they're going to be talking about their three quite different ways of how they are overcoming the hybrid working and recruitment challenges. And they'll be discussing the emerging challenges that are coming out of their approaches and what the opportunities are. So we're really going to take that conversation forward. But first, before I hand over to Stephen, I have a quick roundup of what's coming up with the CCMA. So if you hadn't noticed, LinkedIn is alight with photos from the UK National Contact Centre Awards on Monday evening, where you may have noticed that the most fabulous Vernon Kay joined us. And by all accounts, it was a great night, and it was so fantastic to see the pride on those faces of everybody that won. Bronze, silver, gold. It was just a delight. So if you are one of those winners, congratulations, and I hope you enjoyed the evening. Please do look out for the 2022 programme opening up for nominations in early December. So do look out for that. Also coming up on the 2nd of November, we are hosting the UK National Contact Centre Conference. Again, it is going to be virtual this year. It is all day, it's on Hop-In, and you're welcome to come and join us for as many sessions as you like. And it is free for members. So please do share the conference link with your colleagues, inviting them to join, or maybe just part of the day. And the theme for that session is based on some of the research that we're finding, and that is that the contact centre is in a really strong organisational position right now because of the pandemic, and I believe that contact centre leaders should be really taking advantage of that. So the theme is releasing the power of the contact center. And we've got Ben Page from Ipsos. He'll be joining us right at the start of the day, talking about the macro environment. We are also releasing research looking at what customers really want. The research hasn't taken place yet. That is how hot that research will be. We've also got Ocado and some of those winners from Monday night. We shall be approaching them over the coming days to invite them to share some of their stories. Kantar will be talking about the new CX strategy for 2022. Jabra will be there exploring the rise of the super agent, and Sonsei, following their win on Monday night, will be giving their advice around using engagement to retain colleagues. And then the final sessions at the conference are Martin Hill-Wilson will be hosting a panel debate looking at 2022 and beyond. And Adrian Swinsko will close the conference. And his session is around smashing down the wall. So how you can elevate the contact center in your operation and why you should. So please do sign up for the conference. It's all on our website, ccma.org.uk. And some other things that are coming up between now and Christmas. we are bringing back networking dinners. So for senior leaders, we've got a dinner on the 9th of November in Manchester, where we're going to be talking about recruitment. And on the 16th of November, we're hosting a dinner in London that's looking at outsource as a potential solution to upsizing. And the London one on the 16th of November is coinciding with CC Expo. So, so please do think about that too. And we've also got virtual roundtables coming up as well. So if you get invited to one of those, please do join us. It's a fantastic opportunity to talk to other members and get loads of great ideas and advice. We have got more research being released. So tomorrow, if you haven't already seen it or signed up for it, we are releasing research into the effortless customer experience. So do sign up to hear the findings with Stephen Yap, but also Gavin Scott, who is doing a training course with us around how to create effortless customer experiences, and also Lee Phillips from ServiceNow. So we've also got on the 20th, I hope you're keeping up with this because we've got so much coming up. On the 21st of October, we're releasing a major study into enabling advisors. The findings are really, really enlightening. So please do register for that webinar too. Both have a report, and we will be releasing a report too. As members, everybody that's joining us today are members. And so you also have the unique opportunity to join our special interest groups. Tomorrow, we've got the technology SIG, where we're focusing on AI, artificial intelligence, and Savio will be sharing different applications of the technology, and BGL are going to be talking about how they're using AI. On the 5th of October, we've got the quality management special interest group. So please check that your quality folks are all signed up for that. And in December at the People Agenda SIG, we are going to be exploring recruitment, seeing where it's at that point, and the strategies that people are deploying in order to meet those recruitment objectives. Now, last week, we had 2 special interest groups, and at both of those groups, we were asked about best practice visits. I know that this is a major member benefit, excuse me, and we do want to bring those back as soon as we can. The challenge has been that few people in the office, and of course, as members, you don't particularly want to share an empty office. And of course, doing virtual visits, having quite a few people turn up to your offices has, over the last 18 months, been a little bit of a COVID challenge. So as soon as we can bring those back to you, we will. We've got a number lined up, including Lego, and we will be approaching, as I say, some of the winners from Monday night's UK National Contact Centre Awards. So please do look out for those. And then finally, the final piece of news and update is that we are gearing ourselves up to launch the benchmark programme at the end of the calendar year, ready for data entry in January. This is an exclusive member benefit. It's a fantastic member benefit where you get free benchmarking against 20 KPIs, including salary. So please do look out for that, get ready for that. One person in your organization will be invited to upload your organization's data, and we'll be assessing the data from the last 6 months of 2021. So please do look out for that. We've got a lot going on, and we know we email you quite a lot, but please do just skim read those emails. In particular, every 2 weeks, What's On is sent to you, and that's obviously looking from an events perspective. We have Insight that comes out, and the Academy. So we are trying to keep you up to date. So please do look out for all those emails. And I think I've caught up a little bit of time there already. And so I am now going to hand you over to Stephen Yap, who is going to share with you some insights around the Evolving Contact Centre. Good morning, Stephen. Over to you.
Good morning, Lee. Thank you so much. It's been 18 months and 5 days exactly since we all entered the very first lockdown in the UK in March of 2020. And what an 18 months it has been. We have had 18 short months, perhaps, or 18 long months, depending on how you want to look at it. We've experienced a crash course in remote working. We're going to be talking about that all morning. We've seen rapid changes in customer behavior, We've seen huge shifts in our channels and our channel adoption and our ability to offer our services through new and different channels. We've seen, I would think, probably the most profound change of all, a repositioning and a reframing of the role of the advisor within our organizations. And I think there's a lot more to come on that front. And we're seeing much deeper integration of our contact centers within the operations in which we operate and within which we work. I'm going to talk in more depth about each of these 5 points. I just wanted to call out where these observations come from. They come primarily from a research series called The Evolution of the Contact Center, which we started in the summer of 2020. And we're now up to the very 4th iteration. We're up to the 4th chapter, which was released just a couple of weeks ago. All 4 chapters are available for download from ccma.org.uk. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at those, please do. It's an amazing journey that we've documented through this series from the very beginning, how we were coping and scrambling, I think is the right word, to adjust to everything that the pandemic had brought to us very quickly, all the way through to where we are today. And I'm going to be giving you a high-level overview in the next 20 minutes of some of the things that we've seen on this journey, and there is more to come. Before I get into the detail, though, I'd like to turn the camera to you and ask you a couple of questions to help set the stage. I'm going to run a couple of poll questions. So this should hopefully come up on your screen in just a second. And my first poll question is regarding demand. So the question is, has your overall contact center volume increased, decreased, or stayed the same compared with 12 months ago? Think back to September 2020. End of the summer, we were sort of in between lockdowns. Things had released or loosened up a little bit, but we knew that there were more lockdowns to come. How is your demand situation? How is your volume situation compared with September of last year? Has it increased more than 50%? Has it increased 25 to 50%? Increased somewhere between 1 to 50? Has it stayed the same? Or in fact, has it decreased? So thank you so much for the votes that are coming in. I can see the votes, and nobody is reporting a decrease in demand. We're seeing increases across the board. We're seeing increases, the biggest level of increase, or most people are saying it's increased 25 to 50%. So 2 of us have said it's increased more than 50%. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes before announcing the results. Okay, so 7% say it's increased more than 50%, 32% say it's increased 25 to 50%, and another 28% of us say it's increased 1 to 24%, and 23% say it stayed about the same. So more than half of us, in fact, 60% of us in this webinar this morning are experiencing increases in demand, and in the case of a third of us, we're seeing huge increases of demand between 25 to 50%. And I think that helps sort of frame the challenge that we're all operating in today, which is sudden and significant increases in contact volume, and we're all grappling with how to manage this. The second poll question I'd like to ask you is, again, compared with September 2020 or thereabouts, compared with 12 months ago, are you finding recruitment more challenging, less challenging, or about the same? Is it much more challenging? Is it somewhat more challenging? Is it about the same, or is it less challenging than last year? How are you finding recruitment compared with last year? Okay, the results are coming in quite quickly, which tells me this is probably one that you feel strongly about. So vast majority of us are finding recruitment more challenging. In fact, the majority of us are finding recruitment much more challenging. Let me give it another couple of seconds just for any final replies. Thank you so much. I can see a lot of votes, a lot of responses on the poll. Okay, so 3%, or 1 of us, is saying it's less challenging. 2 of us, or 6%, is saying it's about the same. But everyone else, the vast majority of us, which is 91%, are finding recruitment more challenging. And in fact, more than half of us are saying it's much more challenging than 12 months ago. And that very much echoes everything that I've been hearing in my conversations with contact center leaders and people on the front line. It's a tough recruitment market out there, and I'm going to come back to that later on in my presentation. So let's get to the 5 observations that I put together based on the 4 chapters and really the 18-month journey that we've been on. I don't have to tell you what a crash course it's been in remote working. I think we've learned so much, and it's really important to note that when it comes to remote working, there is no one size fits all. And that's true when it comes of people. Some people respond really well to it and indeed are more productive in a remote environment, and others don't. It could be the individual's nature. It could be the fact that some individuals don't have the right environment at home to be able to be productive. The same is true of organizations. What's right for one organization isn't necessarily right for a different organization. So it's really important to try to avoid any generalizations. It's really specific to individuals. The right approach and the right model is really specific to individual companies and organizations too. For people working at home, for many of our people who are dealing with difficult conversations and coming back to the changes in customer demand, if we do have advisors, which many of us do, who are having those difficult conversations, those emotional conversations, I've heard consistently how challenging it can be to have those conversations when you're at home. It's one thing when you're in the office, you have a tough call, you can get up, have a chat with your colleague in the office and move on. It's another thing when those conversations come into your living room or your dining room or your bedroom. It's much more difficult for advisors to be able to cope with that. There is demand to return to premises. A lot of people we know do want to come back, but are holding back on coming back. There's still a lot of infections going on right now, and I think it's fair to say that we're in a wait and see phase, and most of us are still experimenting, and many people, even those who would like to spend more time in the office, are cautious at the moment given the high level of infections. And I think generally in the UK, we're still in very much a wait and see and let's see what the winter brings type of mindset. We are seeing absences rising for many contact centres. It's fair to say that there is fatigue in our frontline population. And it is challenging to deal with that. And I think a lot of what goes into the thinking about the hybrid model is a response to the absences, a response in some cases to what we're seeing as lowering productivity among our remote workers. It's a very complex set of challenges with which we've got to deal. And this is excuse me, this is I think a nice quote that just I think exemplifies the fact that we all had to move very, very quickly, and we didn't have time to do the due diligence. And even today, we're still catching up on our due diligence. We didn't have time to audit everybody's home environment, make sure that they had the ideal environment with which to work. We just had to do it. And people who didn't have the right environment had to work at home in an environment that perhaps wasn't as ideal as they needed. So still 18 months on, we're still wrestling with all of the implications of this crash course that we've been on. In terms of channel shifts, there's been more investment, there's been more transformation in the last 18 months than arguably in the 10 years prior to that. There's been a huge acceleration in the investment in self-serve channels. Of course, part of this is the need to deflect that increase in demand and to help customers manage themselves to protect the contact center across all swathes of the customer population, younger, older people, all across the country. We're seeing a huge shift from offline to online behaviors, even with the cohorts, typically more mature customers, that the ones that are more likely to retain or want to pick up the phone, even our more mature customer groups are moving online as well. And it's been an opportunity, I think, for us to roll out the new channels that perhaps we wanted to and didn't have the opportunity to. The pandemic has given us the chance to transform, and it's also given us the chance to normalize digital contacts channels for our customer groups. There's been a huge step forward, and of course, a long way still to go. In terms of customer behavior, other than the shift to digital, we've seen a number of quite important ways in which customer behavior is evolving. Of course, even as restrictions have been lifted to a large extent across the UK, we are still living in uncertain times. We are probably right now, as I sit here on the 29th of December, probably feeling as uncertain about what the future brings as at any time in the 18 months before. We've got petrol crises, we've got food shortages, we're not sure what the winter will bring in terms of new infections. The economy is bouncing back, of course, which is a fantastic thing, but I think it's fair to say that as people, as a society, we still are in huge need of reinsurance during these uncertain times. And that is reflected in our customers. That's reflected in the demand that we're seeing in the contact centers. Our customers are turning to us for that reassurance that they need while the world outside remains very uncertain. That means that the conversations that we're hosting in the contact center are migrating from being those predominantly transactional conversations. And as we're being more successful in shifting those transactional conversations to self-serve, the demand coming into the contact center is richer, it's more emotive, it's more complex, which is what we want. We want the simple stuff to be automated and self-served, and we want the stuff that only humans can solve going into the assisted lines. And unfortunately, something that we saw during the pandemic continues to be observed across many of our operations. We are seeing abuse prevalent, particularly in those environments where we may deal with customers who are vulnerable or in difficult situations. It is, I think, a reflection of where we're at. Unfortunately, at the moment, we have a lot of uncertainty in the wider environment, and that is reflected in unfortunately rising abuse that we're having to deal with in the contact centers, and it's reflected in increasing handling times. And many of our operations have actually adjusted our benchmarks and accepted that actually handling times, perhaps we need to recalibrate them, because they will take longer. If conversations are becoming more complex, then naturally they'll take longer to resolve. This is a quote from one of the conversations that we had throughout the course of the research, which I think sums it up perfectly. There's an awful lot more anxiety, and there still is, out there in the world and in our customer base. The role of the advisor is changing as those self-serve interactions take more and more of the simple demand and more of the complex demand is coming into the assisted lines. There's a growing emphasis on our advisors to be able to solve complex problems. Our advisors need hard skills. They need to know about our organization. They need to know about our products. They need to be able to follow processes. They need to be able to use technology platforms. They also need more than ever soft skills. They need people skills. They need empathy skills. They need communication skills. They need problem solving skills. They need to know who to go to if they can't solve the problem themselves. And what this is leading to ultimately is a reframing of what the advisor role is and of advisors as a career path. Those contact centers who are blazing this trail are seeing the advisor role as an entry point into the organization and starting to create those progression opportunities into other parts of the organization, creating more progression, creating more structured career plans and pathways for advisors to both progress within the contact center and even move to roles outside of the contact center. And of course, in the 18 months since the pandemic, as contact centers have been the front line of our organizations, as temporarily stores closed and other channels were not available to our customers, we became the face of the brand and the face of our organizations. And we've seen more appreciation and more recognition from other parts of the organization for what we do. We've had more visibility than ever since the pandemic. We've had more job mobility to and from the contact center and other departments. And we're increasingly involved in more customer journeys than ever before. We're not just the post-sales customer service piece. More and more, we are involved in pre-purchase. We are involved in sales enablement. We are involved in helping guide customers towards the right products and the right services. And that means increasingly we are a profit center and not just a cost center. And it's great to see that in some cases, the silos are starting to break down, such as the integration of social teams with contact center teams, which makes complete sense if you think about it, because social is just a channel by which customer contact is handled. We've seen, this is the quote from one of the contact centers, we've seen a huge amount of career progression to and from the contact center into other roles. if you started in a contact center, if you've been successful as an advisor on the front line, you've got those hard skills, you've got those soft skills. It sets you up incredibly well. And as an organization, you want to retain those skills. You've trained people, you've invested in the people, you want to create opportunities for those people. And there are roles elsewhere in the organization where those hard skills and those soft skills prove extremely valuable. So coming back to recruitment, 90%, more than 90% of us report that it's more challenging to recruit than it was a year ago. And no surprise, a couple of weeks ago, the Office for National Statistics published its latest 3-month vacancies update for the period May through July 2021. And for the first time ever, the number of open vacancies in the UK exceeded 1 million. The ONS counted 1,053,000 open job vacancies in the UK in that 3-month period. And that is the first time that the number has gone over 1 million. It's easily the highest number that the ONS has recorded since they started recording this. And that tells you everything we need to know about the wider environment, how difficult it is to recruit. And more, we're competing against other industries. We're not just competing against contact centers, we're competing against other industries for scarce talent. So salaries on the rise, perhaps I would say finally, salaries are on the rise. I think if we are serious about our advisors, if we're serious about creating career opportunities, then naturally we have to pay as well. Some of us are looking at the possibility of remote working, firstly, as a point of advantage. A lot of jobs don't enable remote working, whereas if we can offer remote working, that might be a competitive advantage for a contact center, an attractive reason to work for a contact center. It may also allow us to recruit from wider geographic pools than historically we've done. So if people can remote work, then actually that opens up more talent pools for us, but it's not necessarily straightforward. You've got to have technology provision. So your people's kit have to be set up, and it's not going to be possible for them to come to the office to get their kit fixed. How do you provide for that? How do you onboard and how do you train? We know how challenging it can be to onboard and train remotely. So you have to have your technology, your onboarding and your training processes aligned before you can seriously think about recruiting primarily remote workers who don't live near the office. And one of the questions that has come up in the conversations is the challenge of keeping culture alive, the challenge of keeping advisors engaged when they are remote working, when you're sitting in your home in front of your screen, one job starts to feel like another job. And the question posed is, are people not as connected to the organization when they're working from home? And does that then trigger them to start thinking about working for other organizations? It's so imperative that we find ways in the hybrid world, in the remote working world, to keep the culture alive, to foster that sense of connection to the organization and to colleagues that exists quite naturally in office. We have to work harder to make sure that also exists in a hybrid and remote world. And we've got to continue to invest in welfare and mental health. It's great to see that these initiatives are very much front and center in almost every operation that I talk to, and will continue to be. That is one of the, I think, the long-lasting outcomes of the pandemic is the heightened awareness and the heightened support that's now available for people. It's no longer stigmatized to reach out and ask for help. In terms of the career opportunities, it's really important to start really thinking about those levels, those competency levels, those skills that you require, and define them and define those levels, support them with training and coaching so that people can clearly see the pathways, people can clearly see what the next level looks like and what they need to achieve to get to that next level. And where possible, if you can, think about fostering talent exchange, secondments with other parts of the organization, allow your advisors to spend time in other parts of the organization, and even vice versa. I've heard some great examples, for example, of organizations with the retail estate who fostered exchanges with store staff coming into the contact center and contact center staff coming into the store estate. And this is a quote just coming back to competency levels. You might have 3 levels. You define the skills, such as empathy or influencing. You define 2, 3, 4 levels within that skill, and then you train and support people so that people can feel themselves progressing within that particular skill from level to level. I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. I think more than ever, it's so important that the contact center and what we do is be framed as an investment with a return and not just a cost. Of course, the reality is some of us are still operating in a primarily cost-driven environment, but hopefully the last 18 months has given us some if you like, some narratives and some support to reframe that conversation in terms of investment. Customer expectations are higher than ever. We are an environment that nurtures talent and skills that are valuable to an organization. We are an operation that collects probably more customer data than any other part of the operation. And smart organizations understand that that data is a source of immense competitive advantage. We also know that contact experiences and what the customer experiences within the contact center has a direct impact on how they see the organization and a direct impact on how others see the organization through word of mouth. So there are many ways in which the contact center is a profit center. It is a brand equity driver. It is a place to hothouse talent. It is a place to collect data that's going to be valuable to an organization. And in my experience, the culture in the contact center, the way that the contact center is positioned within an organization is a direct mirror of how customer orientated the organization is. If you have a low customer orientation within your organization, then you're going to have a lot of internal silos. You're going to have other departments who don't really understand or appreciate the contact center. You may be running on outdated technology. You probably don't have a great advisor experience. On the other hand, if you have a very customer-centric organization, the contact center tends to be much more closely connected and working in partnership with other teams. You'll have processes that are optimized, not just for the customer, but processes optimized for colleagues to help solve problems. And you'll have a strong culture of other departments helping to support the front line. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for listening. Before I finish and hand back to Lee, I just wanted to trailer a couple of pieces that Lee's already mentioned in her introduction this morning, coming up very soon. You don't have long to wait, actually, until the next research launch. We've got one coming tomorrow at 1 p.m. This is a customer-facing piece. I've just completed a customer survey, and this is all about understanding customer effort. What causes customer effort? What really frustrates customers in terms of their contact experiences? And join me at 1 p.m. if you'd like to find out more. And I'm going to forewarn you, the results are surprising. And then on the 21st of October, I'm going to be delighted to launch the very biggest study that CCMA has ever launched. And this is a study in the UK, in the France and Germany of the front line. So turning the spotlight back to our colleagues on the front line. And we're going to be talking about this throughout the course of this morning. How do we recruit, train, engage, retain our people? And we've just completed, well, I'm in the process of completing the very biggest study ever done in the contact center industry across 3 countries, looking at that very topic. What are the things that we need to be doing to engage and empower our front line so that we can attract the best people and we can retain more of our great people? Thank you for listening. Back to you, Lee.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And it's so enlightening to see that progress that we've been making in the industry. And I can't wait to see those 2 new research programs come to light. So thank you so much. And next up, we have Sharon Ole, the Customer Service Director at Sage. Good morning, Sharon, and good to meet you on Monday evening.
Yes, good morning, and lovely to meet you all as well. It's a great evening.
And so you had quite a medal haul on Monday evening. And so I'm just going to do a little recap to share with everybody who's listening how you guys did. So Lindsay Heron won gold in the Team Manager of the Year sales. Sarah Race picked up bronze in the Contact Center Manager of the Year large. The Customer Enablement Team took home silver for Contact Center Support Team of the Year customer. The Sales Enablement Team took home bronze in the L&D Team of the Year category. And the HR Customer Service Team won silver for Digital Team of the Year. And to top it off, you also won bronze for Contact Center of the Year. You had a fantastic night on Monday.
We did. I mean, obviously we wanted gold, but I'll totally take bronze. We won the Northeast one, the big one last year, so we'll come back again next year and hopefully we'll get the big one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so the session today, so we've got about 20 minutes, taking us up to about 10:30. And it is an open session, so I've got some questions for you. But if there are any questions or comments that anybody wants to make, please do use the Q&A in the on Zoom. We've got it open. I will be watching it, and if there's anything that comes in, I will attempt to pose those questions to Sharon. So basically, I'd like to find out a little bit more about the contact centre operation at Sage. What have been the challenges in recent months, how you've adapted, but also, and potentially more importantly, what you're seeing as the emerging opportunities and maybe some of those challenges that you see coming out. So, of course, one of the first places I want to start is understanding a little bit more in depth around your approach to hybrid working. And how you're managing the changing wants and needs of colleagues. So let's start by finding out what happened with Sage over the summer.
Yeah, so currently we have colleagues working between office and home. So we started that program of work. We still had our old office open, so we were working out of North Park headquarters, but we had a number of colleagues, a limited number of colleagues who needed some extra support. So we'd recruited, trained and coached, a number of colleagues from home, which is not something that we've done before. And I know we all had to adapt to, the change in circumstances. But some of those teams did find it tough. That you're dealing with complex queries, you're supporting accountants and business partners to run their businesses. And some colleagues had not met each other face to face. So, we did start to see some attrition and absence creeping in. So we started to ask our colleagues what would work for them, and we introduced human flexible work agreements, and we're still experimenting, and we're still trying to understand what works for colleagues, but what also works for the business. And what we really wanted to do was offer flexibility, but also offer the colleague the time and the space to collaborate in the office, so that they get a mixture of both. So we had a small amount of people come back to our North Park office. Engagement has been at the forefront of our minds when I think about colleagues throughout the pandemic, and we know it's not over yet. So we have to continue to offer that support and that flexibility for all colleagues. We also offered our colleagues 3 wellbeing days this year to allow them time away to support their mental health. And we also opened our brand new headquarters in July at Cobalt. So that was a massive boost for the workforce. So, they love the new spaces, and it does allow them to collaborate, but also get some support from their colleagues and socialise in a safe environment. So that's where our colleagues are at the moment. We have had to focus a lot on mental health. So we've taken our leaders through mental health training. Actually, we partnered with you guys in the CCMA on this. We did about 5 leaders, went through the program, and then they came back and they trained the trainer. So they took all of the leaders through this, not just in service, but across sales and across all the different regions that we have. And we also have Healthy Mind coaches who are on hand for colleagues if they do need support. And we're in the process of delivering more training for our leaders, because that, last year, I think we were talking about this with Stephen recently, everybody just had to move home, do what you can, but we needed to think about what leaders needed to help us to be successful and engage our people. So we've got a leadership development program, which is focusing on emotional intelligence, influence and mindset, and during these strange times, and help them with coaching remotely. So there's some of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of months, and the human flexible work piece. We'll continue to experiment and see what actually works, because things might change as we move into the winter months, and people probably don't want to come into the office as much when it's cold and snowing.
Absolutely, and that's a really interesting point I want to pick up on, not necessarily the snow, but the what you're anticipating happening, because I'm with you that I don't think we've landed yet. We haven't settled and stabilized into what people necessarily want, let alone what actually might actually work for both them and the business. So what are you looking to see what will happen over the coming months and maybe even into early 22.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, we're in a mixture. What our experiment is that we're running now within our contact centre is 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. Not everybody's coming in for 3 days, but what we're actually doing is getting teams to come in on the same day so they can collaborate together. It is working really well at the moment, but there are some colleagues who still don't feel safe, and there's still some colleagues who love working from home. Some have like long journeys to get into the office, but we're taking feedback regularly and understand how they're feeling, and safety is paramount. But as I said, I do think things will potentially change, and it's one of the things that we're planning for, that if we did go into another lockdown or we start to see high absence, how do they then be manage that in the contact centre, but also make sure that people get the support that they need. We are still recruiting, and I'm not saying we can't train and recruit people from home. We absolutely can, and we did it, and we've learned a lot from that. So if we do need to move back to home, we'll be able to get through that now, knowing what we've learned. But it's the engagement piece and the safety piece is paramount for us. We're just about to remove social distancing in the new space in October. We do have an app where colleagues can book in, so we know how many people are coming in and we know it's going to be safe. But at least with the removal of social distancing, we can allow them to collaborate more. Now, it might be that comes out and we have to put it back in, who knows? But at least we've got a plan for, if this happens, we can, we can put the social distancing back in, or we can move colleagues home, because we've got all the technology in place now, and all of the support and processes that are going to help us to be successful if it happens again.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because the social distancing piece, I think people have got used to, but you quite quickly, and Monday night will be a prime example, you quite quickly get used to going back to normal. And so, yeah, I guess that is one to monitor. And I just want to pick up on you talked about there around the training. And yes, contact centres up and down the country have been training remotely for the last 18 months because they've had to. We have started to see in some of the research that we've been doing that that's great and it works to a point, but that there are some challenges that have emerged from that. And what's worked for you and what's maybe not working so well, and you're looking at new approaches?
Yeah, so we, our products and services, they are complex. As I said before, you're helping accountants and business partners to run their business, and we don't just help people to install the programs. We're helping them with VAT and legislation. So it's quite a 4 or 5 week full-time training in the classroom, which can be hard when you're doing that from home on a screen. And that's what colleagues have told us, that's the difficult thing. And I think when you've taken your first call, when you're in the office, I'm taking my first call, whereas, at home, you're sitting there home alone. Yes, you've got somebody on, you've got your coach, because we have one-on-one coaching initially, and they're on Teams, but that's one of the things that has been more difficult. So if you're in the office and you can say, great, you're doing a great job, or put yourself on hold, I need to help you. And that's one of the things that when we did start to bring people back, we asked if people were happy to do some of the training from home, but when they're ready to take the first call, are you happy to come in the office and you have one-on-one support, socially distanced? And that has helped, because that has been some of the feedback that we've had from some of our colleagues who were brand new into the business and haven't felt the culture and haven't felt the support face to face. So we've been doing a combination of both. Obviously, if we need to go back to working from home, we make it work. Of course we will. But people are saying they like to have the combination of the flexibility at home, but also getting some support face to face and just building that team environment. So
yeah, and that makes total sense. And I guess when you're in that virtual learning environment, it maybe it just takes a little bit longer to get that comfort. And I guess then when you go into the office, it's another new experience, and suddenly you're taking calls and you've got people around you that maybe you weren't used to having around you. That's interesting. Now, we have had a question come in and I'm going to pose it to you if I may. It's from Amanda. She says, thank you for sharing what you've been sharing. would be really good to understand how you plan for the time your teams on the days they are working in the office. Do you consolidate all offline time for the days they are in the office?
So that's what we've tried to do, and we'll be doing more of that as we move forward. So if you're going to be in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then all of your the guys huddle every day anyway, but they do that on Teams, but we want them to do that face to face once it's safe to do so. And yes, we're working with our resource planning function to make sure that if you're in the office, that's the day you have your one-to-one, that's when you have your team time, your team meeting, or any training that's done. It's done face to face in the office. And that's one of the big parts of the plan, and the human flexible work of making sure we've got people coming in across the 5 days, because in general we are Monday to Friday. A lot of people have been wanting to come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, funnily enough, and want to stay at home Mondays and Fridays. So trying to streamline that, because we can't have all of the offline on our busiest days. So yes, we are working with their resource planning to make sure that you get that face-to-face time when it's most important to do so in the office.
Yes. And so if that's, and I want to talk about recruitment, where it's clearly a massive issue in the industry. Stephen referenced it a moment ago when he was going through his session. We're hearing it from members that it's the thing that that we want to talk about and explore how people are dealing with it. Is there a need to recruit more, because actually the frontline staff, because they're coming into the office and therefore when they're in the office they're not on calls, is that creating a need for more frontline staff, or is that just managing what you've already got?
We're not recruiting more because we're bringing people into the office and doing their offline time in the office. Okay. But I'm not going to beat around the bush. Earlier in the year, we had live roles, and it was we were really struggling to fill them. So we've had to, revamp the whole recruitment process, which we did in May. We looked at the job description in great detail. We changed the name of the role to a customer support expert. Some people gave us some feedback. They weren't want to come and work in a call center and didn't think it was, weren't sure what it really looked and felt like. So we've changed that. We did a full redesign of the recruitment process, we got the recruitment team and our customer services leaders involved in that. And we did look at rewards. So I know Stephen was mentioning that we're starting to see, the salaries are going up. But actually, I think the salary we now have in place for our frontline colleagues is what it should be for the role that they're actually doing. So it's extremely competitive in the market. And we have really noticed a shift change in the calibre of people who are applying and being successful in the process. But it isn't just about the monetary side of things. We're also looking at a career framework so we can develop colleague skills. That's still under, we're still working on that, so some of that's still under wraps. But it is about development for our people and that constant engagement. So earlier in the year, to answer your question, we did struggle. During the summer months, we filled all of our open roles, and we've got more roles coming down the tracks. But why we haven't needed as many people as we've needed in the past is we've done a lot of work with our digital, our digital channels. So we're trying to move some of the more easier process-driven queries to the right channel for the type of query, and then leaving the frontline experts to deal with the more complex queries. And we have noticed a shift change in that. So some of your call times will be longer when you've got that, that meaty, complex query coming through.
And it's complex. It's not just a case of I've got spaces and I need people to fill them. It's how those jobs have come about, and using technology, like you say, to try and support the customer experience, so that the conversations that come into the contact center are ones that are more complex. Average handling time goes up, and that is all fine. And it's interesting what you're talking about from a salaries perspective. It's quite scary when you hear that there are some real salary hikes going on in the industry. And on one hand, as Stephen said, it's great that the skill set, the competence, the importance of the role of frontline staff is being recognised with a need to grow the salary. I think that the challenge, the balance, is that if it grows too much, then what does that mean in a few years' time when things maybe start to become more difficult and cost cutting kicks in? So it's a real balance. So it feels like what you're doing from looking at the other parts of a package, and that career piece feels like it's the right thing to do. We heard about that in the summer when Merge were talking about when you're recruiting, offer them those career packages. What kind of careers, what does that look like for you guys? What does that career path framework that you talked about, what does that look like?
So, with the frontline colleagues, it was always seen as an entry-level job, but what we've recognised is it isn't an entry-level job anymore because of 4 or 5 weeks full-time training and 9 months in a grad bay and at least 12 months before you're, really competent. But what we've always said to our colleagues in Sage is, we're head office, the world's your oyster. And it used to be frontline colleagues would go to a coaching role or a team leader role. Whereas now they can go into learning services, they can go into enablement, resource planning. So we actually tell them, you don't necessarily have to stay in services. We'd love you to. But if you wanted to go in HR, if you wanted to go into marketing, if you wanted to go to a commercial role, the world is your oyster at Sage, and we want to keep Sage colleagues at Sage, for as long as possible. So we might do all the hard work in the contact center and recruit people, and then people will come and take our people. I'm only joking, but yeah, that is how it works. You would start off, and then you would go into any career path that you actually want to, and we help people from very early on in their career. So it's something we talk to our grad bay about within the first 3 months. What do you want to do next? What other skills have you had from previous roles? And we find that makes people much more sticky and want to stay with Sage.
And do you know what? I know you joke about doing all the hard work recruiting people into the business, and then they get stolen by other functions. And I get that, but I'm not surprised, because the insight that you get when you're working on the front line, the knowledge that you build up about what customers like and want, about the business, about the products, it's just phenomenal. That information that those frontline workers therefore then have. So it's not surprising. And in some respects, that's for me is one of the ways that the contact center can demonstrate its value to the rest of the business. So I think that is great opportunity.
Yeah, they see our people as gold dust. As you say, whenever anybody new starts with Sage, not just in the contact center, we always recommend on that onboarding journey in the first week, come and listen to some calls, come and listen to read some of the interactions on the chat, understand what our customer problems are and how we solve them. So those people are like gold dust.
So let's stay with those, the thinking about customers, and just for the last few minutes, what have you seen as a change in customer behavior? I'm quite aware that you guys have more of a B2B customer base, but what are you seeing that's changed, and how are you responding to those changes?
So customers, what I believe our customers want are always on. They want us to be there, not necessarily at the end of the phone, because that has changed over the last couple of years with all the work we've done with our digital transformation program. But they want to be able to get the answer first time, and they want it to be really quick. So if they ring us, they want to be able to get the answer first time. First time contact resolution is a big one for us. But if they want to chat to us, if they want to go on to the help centre, and so we've had a big focus on improving our help centre, making it easy for them to get answers from us. And we've also put in product support in. We're constantly improving that. So depending on what page you're in the program, you can click F1 and get some support, some knowledge base articles. We've stopped sending articles out to customers because we want to educate them whilst they're interacting with us. And so we're doing a lot in terms of, we've created a persona called Ron, and that allows our experts to really engage with the customer through the articles. and being deliberate with our tone of voice in the articles instead of being very corporate, so it makes it easy for them to read, because some of the articles can be quite complex, and we're going to be starting to measure exactly how customers are reacting to us. We're going to be tracking and continuously improve what we can do to help support them. So as I say that, I think the customers want us to be always on. They're probably not as forgiving as they were at the beginning of the pandemic. So we've really improved our average speed of answer from a few months ago, when we were struggling with some of the attrition and not being able to recruit. But again, we need to improve that more and more and more as time goes on. So.
And it's interesting what you say about the frustrations are maybe not as bad as they were. We were in a retail SIG meeting last week, and there was a feeling there were still customer frustrations there, but nothing like they were. And I think it sounds like that's balancing out from organisations putting in place, because of those frustrations, the right mechanisms, the right approaches to be able to deal with those customers. Loads of different things that people are doing, but also customers are beginning to actually just calm down and get back into the swing of things. So my last question for you, Sharon, is from an operational perspective, what do you see as your 3 emerging challenges over the coming months, and how are you preparing for them?
So as I said at the beginning, it's all around colleague engagement. I think the colleague engagement and well-being is key. I think people are still, worried about what's going to be coming down the tracks in winter. So I think that absence could be a challenge for us. Moving people back home could be something that we need to do. We need to respond to it. So I think that's one of the key things for us. And I think just staying ahead of the game with technology, and the things that we were talking around, constantly improving that always on approach and making it simple and easy for customers to interact with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon. This has been fantastic talking to you. I could talk to you for hours, but really, really appreciate you giving us your time this morning. We are now going to go on a break. We shall be back in about 10 to 15 minutes at 10:45. Everybody that's on the call, please do stay on the call. You don't need to disappear and then come back. And we shall see you in about 10 minutes. Thanks a lot, Sharon.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Okay, so welcome back. It is 10:45 and we have got a couple more sessions coming up. So between now and 12:30, we are going to be talking to Kate Palmer and giving you an opportunity to ask her lots of questions that you might have. I've got some already lined up, as I usually do, but please do join in and ask her some questions using the Q&A functionality on the platform. After Kate, we shall hear from Adam. And Adam at Citrix, he's going to talk about the advisor experience at home and how technology can really support that experience for the advisor. And he's got some great tips and advice to share with you. And then at 11:45, Stephen Yap is hosting our panel debate, where we'll be finding out about 3 different hybrid models, and also what's coming next, what the challenges and opportunities that are really emerging as we go through this hybrid working adaptation. So first of all, Kate, if you'd like to join me on screen, Kate Palmer, you are the HR Advice and Consultancy Director at Peninsula. Welcome.
Morning Lee, morning all.
Morning. So I'm delighted to have you back. We've had the pleasure of your company and expertise before, and you've been a real hit with the members because you say it as it is. You tell us the advice, you're clear, and it's fantastic. And today we're going to be covering some really pressing issues that are really emerging now. So as I say, if anybody's got any questions, it is a Q&A session. It is an Ask Our Expert session. So please do go ahead and start asking your questions, and we shall be monitoring them, and I shall be posing them to Kate. And we're going to cover 4 key areas. The first is vaccinations and testing. Then we will cover the end of furlough and resizing, and answering some of the questions around that you're getting asked, Kate.
Yeah.
Then we're going to spend a little bit more time on flexible and hybrid working, and from an HR perspective, what organisations need to know. And then shortly after 11 o'clock, we will explore recruitment and obviously some of the HR real issues that are going on there. So first, vaccinations and testing. Kate, what should companies be doing?
Yeah, okay. And I think the first thing I would say is I'm in the unique position, I suppose, where I'm a HR professional by trade, but I run a contact centre of 263. So I'm hopeful I can get tips off you guys as well today. It's, that's what I'm here for as well. But yeah, vaccination and testing. So we're getting a lot of queries on it, clearly. I think the first thing you need to be thinking about is to establish whether certainly your position on vaccination being mandatory or not, as the case may be. You need to consider your environment, the role that you're recruiting for, the role that your staff are in, because that is fundamental to decide whether, well, what position you take on vaccination, to be quite honest. So you will have seen in the news, that the care industry, anyone that's regulated by the CQC in England, the government have made it quite easy in some respects, because you have to have your double vaccination by the 11th of November, coming very quickly. And if you haven't, you can dismiss that employee if there's nowhere to redeploy them to. So, that particular setting, care, the government have taken obviously quite a forthright stance based on the context of those roles. That whole piece of legislation is subject to a judicial review. So it is getting challenged right now, but it's looking, the government are very confident that there will be no repercussions of that and it will proceed. So care industry, very clear as to your position, the position you can take. There is also a consultation out for frontline NHS workers for mandatory vaccinations, COVID and flu. We'll await that. The consultation's due to end on the 1st of December, but it's very likely that's going to go in the same way as the care setting. And then that will possibly open up avenues for other similar industry types to care and frontline. Obviously, I doubt many of us fall into that industry type. I suspect none of us do. So what's our position? What's the position of a contact centre? You've got to look at the type of role people are doing. Certainly, this is uncharted territory. If you decide to take a mandatory vaccination position or a Pimlico plumber's position, which you may have seen in the news, no jab, no job, that poses some risk because it's not been tested, it's not been challenged. Is it appropriate to an office worker like myself to be forced to take both vaccines? Probably not. Who knows? There is no test for it as yet. So it's the position to encourage staff to take it up is probably the wisest and safest one right now. Easier to implement something more forthright with new starters, because as you offer a job, you offer the terms and they accept them. Much harder to implement a mandatory vaccination stance for tenured current staff, because they've already accepted the jobs on the terms you've offered. So look, there's a lot to think about there. It'll all come out in the wash, that, Lee. I mean, very clear for care sector, subject to that judicial review. Very likely to follow suit in frontline NHS in England. The rest of us, we kind of, scrambling around in the dark, really, because we don't know what is going to be the defined and assured position that's tested in a tribunal. But what we do know is encouragement is the wisest step. And quite honestly, the same goes for testing. It all follows the same path.
And that was going to be my question around testing. So obviously at the awards on Monday evening, we asked that everybody that came along had double vaccination, could prove double vaccination, PCR negative test. Yeah. And if they couldn't do that, then they were invited to do a lateral flow test otherwise they weren't going to be getting in. And that was all about making it a COVID safe place for everybody that joined us. And thankfully, there was only 5 people out of over 700 people that weren't able to prove a PCR or a negative, a double vaccination. So if from a testing perspective, what should organisations do? Because contact centres are environments where there could be a lot of people in the same room.
Yeah, I think that's a really wise position to take that you took for the event the other night. But whether that in itself will get challenged in due course, Lee, is questionable, because You know, people might say it's an infringement on my human rights to be tested. These are the types of cases that are likely to come out in due course over time, and certainly double vaccination. I'm not double vaccinated, but you're preventing me from free movement because of my religion, or because I'm medically exempt, or because I'm pregnant. You know, we are going to get cases that are going to test that position just like that, really. But certainly I can speak from what we're doing. We're still doing testing on site, but we encourage, we don't force. And, you know, we go along the lines of the fact that, you know, 95% of everyone that's coming in here is being tested. I know that creates a 5% percentage of uncertainty, and, you know, but we've decided to take that encouragement stance because of all the risk attached to it, to be quite honest. And people have such extreme views, don't they, on testing and vaccination. You know, it's very rare people are meeting in the middle. We've got people here that are so forthright that the colleagues should be vaccinated. We've got people here that are so forthright that they shouldn't be vaccinated. And it's all going to come out in case law.
Yeah, interesting. So let's move the conversation on to the end of furlough and resizing. Yes. And because of course that's it's all happening
2 days
really soon.
Yeah. So interestingly, you know, we pull our nature of advice codes, the types of things we're getting asked about each week. And redundancy, ironic, I thought it would have shot up as furloughs coming to an end. It's over time gone down. We had a peak at the start of the pandemic, and it kind of maintained that peak, and then gradually since about May it's come down. So I do think that people have done a lot of the resizing and their efficiency exercises much earlier than today's date. But yeah, quite. We've got 2 days to go for furlough. So whether we see a spike in resizing redundancies post the end of this month, yet to be known. But the feel I get is many businesses have done that, and actually now they're working to drive success. And in fact, they need all hands on deck because attrition is quite high, attraction is quite difficult, and if anything, they need more staff than less. So I think that's probably why we're not seeing the redundancies coming through. But yeah, things to think about in terms of the end of furlough. If you've got someone who's been furloughed for an extensive period, reintegrating them back into the workplace, how are you going to do that? You know, we've got some people that have been furloughed for 18 months out there. It's a long time not working. It's double the length of most maternity leave periods. So how are you going to retrain, integrate, reintroduce them back into the workplace? Also, are you going to get a flurry of flexible working requests? What's your business stance on that is an important point. And confidence building and reintegration is the thing that's coming through stronger for us, to be quite honest, as opposed to resizing and redundancies.
And it's interesting that, so I guess organisations, there's potentially an opportunity here for contact centres that are looking to recruit, struggling to recruit. Are there staff that are elsewhere in the business, doing anything else in the business, arguably, that have been furloughed? And is there a risk of redundancy there? Maybe they can be redeployed in the contact centre. But I guess that's the case across the board, that if there are going to be some redundancies, they may not be people that have worked in the contact centre, but maybe there's an opportunity where you've got bright, intelligent people that are able to come in and do a fantastic job in the contact centre because their role elsewhere is no longer there.
Without a doubt, that's a really good point, Lee. And, you know, as part of a formal consultation procedure for redundancy, you are expected to offer alternative work. So if you do have vacancies within the business, you're expected to be putting them to the employees who are at risk. And obviously redeploying from another area to the contact centre could be a really great thing. You know, at contact centres, we offer kind of stable hours a lot of the time. Many of us have embraced home working. There might be real attractions to that role that maybe haven't come across their thinking process before, and the individual is quite attracted to it. So without a doubt, and you know, if there was another area of the business here who were making redundancies, I'd be in there pitching to say what a great role I could offer in this contact centre, get our sales hats on and evidence what great places we are to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm going to come back to the recruitment, but there was something else you said in what you were talking about, and that was around flexibility.
Yeah.
Flexibility and hybrid working. Now, arguably, that's a similar thing. Hybrid working, we talk about that being working from home, working in the office, working a bit of both. Flexible working being a little bit more about the hours that you work. And obviously we've heard that the government are suggesting that all employees should be offered flexible working.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting one because I took this up with my mum, who is a teacher.
Yeah.
And she said, can you imagine if that was the case across the board, and that when you recruited a new teacher, the teacher could say, right, I'm after some flexible working. I want to work from home on a Tuesday and Thursday. And the impact that that would have on teaching and schools. So recognizing that it might not be appropriate for everybody. What are the questions that you're being asked at the moment? And what is your advice around hybrid, flexible?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you use that example, because I used that example specifically with our kind of PR team last week about how simply some roles just can't accommodate flexible working. And just picking up on something you said there, Lee, hybrid working does come under the heading of flexible. So flexible, a request for flexible working can be, I want a job share, I want to start at 9 instead of 8, I want to work at home 2 days a week. So it's much broader and wider than sometimes we think. So, but coming back to the point on the government consultation, so there was a lot of press about on this last week, you may have seen. There's a consultation out now, it will be out for 6 weeks, and you get a feel for where the government are going with the consultation based on the questions they're asking. Flexible working from day one was part of the Conservative manifesto and has been talked about since 2019. It's been parked because of COVID. I feel like the government have suddenly got a list out of things that they've had on hold. You'll see this, paid carers leave. There's going to be lots of legislative changes over the next few months between now and April. The thrust of their questioning is that flexible working, right now you can only request flexible working after 26 weeks service. They want to change that to day one right to request flexible working. They also want to change based on the questions that they're posing. We assume there are 8 statutory reasons on which you can refuse a request for flexible working. Are they enough? Should there be an obligation on the employer to explain in more detail the refusal? Many just say no right now, which, you know, from my perspective, I would never handle a request like that. It's not enough. You need to give your business rationale. The process is getting challenged. So there's a lot of things in the mix that will very likely change come April next year. So we've had loads of queries around what does this mean if I've got to give it from day one? It means they can request it. You still don't have to agree to it, but it's very likely in a refusal or a compromise that you're putting forward, you've got to give more of your business rationale. And flexible working, indirect discrimination claims at tribunal are one of the hardest things to defend if you refuse, because it is so difficult to evidence that you cannot accommodate something, particularly when it's just a change of an hour or a change of a working day, albeit a teacher asking to work from home 3 days a week. I can categorically say you've probably got good business rationale to refuse that. But loads of questions around what does this mean for me if it's a day one right with my recruitment and my staff and engagement and attraction. The only caveat to that I would say is I don't see a flurry of requests at 26 weeks service right now. So whether that will come at day one, I don't know. But with that recruitment challenges across all businesses, it could well be a factor in attraction right now.
And I guess what organisations will therefore look to do if that does come in is make it quite clear at the point of recruitment what the flexibility is. And whether that is an hours, whether that is like you say, there's so many different ways that you can describe flexible working, so that they're set up to be able to refuse later potentially.
Definitely, I think, you know, if for every business, this one included, if it does come in April, we need to be being explicit at interview stage, at recruitment stage about what we can offer, because the last thing you want is someone walking through the door day one, sticking in a request for 2 days, dropping 2 days, you can't accommodate it, and they're out 2 days later. You know, that's a waste of everyone's time and money. So I definitely, in answer to that, Lee, and certainly one thing that's been kind of floated around is that there's going to be a requirement on businesses to put in their adverts what flexible arrangements they can offer. So it ties just into that, but whether that will be an obligation on us as businesses is yet to be known, but it's certainly been spoken about.
And I guess yes, it could be an obligation, but as you're talking, I'm thinking about it in the same way that I thought about GDPR. It was an obligation. You got to do it.
Yeah.
But those that actually embraced it as this is a good thing. This is an opportunity. This is a way that we can do things better, do things right. I think probably succeeded better with GDPR than those that did a tick box exercise. And I guess that's the same thing here, especially when going through the recruitment challenges. So actually, if you're able to offer flexible working, you're able to define those roles in a flexible way, then you might solve your recruitment challenges sooner.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. It's like anything, there's such diverse opinion on it. But absolutely, if you're a business that has embraced it or are wanting to embrace it, and you know, it can offer so many advantages, maximize that at recruitment stage. Because if you're, you know, right now, it's a candidates market, isn't it? There's more jobs than candidates. So if you get 5 offers on the table, which is not unusual right now, you know, if you've got 5 offers and one's offering hybrid working and the other 4 aren't, you're going to go with the hybrid working if that is what you want. So absolutely, it could be a real advantage to recruitment and retention.
Yes. So let's go into recruitment. Let's start talking about that. And as I say, if anybody's got any questions on what we've covered so far or around recruitment, please do put them in the Q&A. So like you say, it is a candidate market out there. They seem to be holding the shots, which is making it really, really difficult. And what candidates are looking for is not necessarily in line with what a business wants to offer. And when I say wants to offer, that might be because it's partly role-based, but it might be because of policy-based and just historical legacy stuff that's just really difficult to move forward. It takes time to move those things forward. What are the kind of questions that you're being asked, and what advice are you giving operational contact center leaders that are looking to recruit?
Yeah, I think that the challenge most businesses are having is that cycle where you can't recruit quick enough. So those that are in the workplace are too busy, and hence your attrition goes up. So that's without doubt, and then you get conflict. The amount of grievances we're dealing with and resignations, interestingly, have both gone up in terms of what our clients are asking about. And I think I can only make assumptions, but I'm sure it's related to this whole recruitment challenge because it's a vicious circle, isn't it? So in terms of advice, for me, it's all about creativity. I mean, I run an HR contact center. I'm facing the same challenge with recruitment, certainly. You know, it's all about creativity. I've got one person, our head of ops, she's spending 50% of a week just on sourcing. And we're working really closely with Portfolio, who we work with, on sourcing the right candidates. So we've actually changed our recruitment strategy. We're actually looking at people who have practical HR experience as opposed to theoretical. People managers, people that have worked in retail, people that, you know, have had a tough 18 months and want a career in a certain industry. So we've changed our recruitment strategy. I've got someone focused on it constantly, which wasn't the case beforehand. And it's about creativity. You know, what can you do to stand out from the rest? Testimonials, videos, advertising on TikTok. I've heard some people doing, not my thing, I don't know how to use that, but advertising on TikTok, LinkedIn, more presence on LinkedIn, advertising different things really that are not just reward and monetary, your CSR policy, the social aspects to the role. It's all about standing out from the rest, Lee, and you've got to think on your feet with that, because as I say, if you've got 5 offers, you get to list point, don't you, where you're writing pros and cons of each. And it's about if your list is longer, essentially.
And it's interesting, we're going to hear a little bit later from Ascensos, where they've deployed a more local model to try and overcome some of their recruitment challenges. But you talked about, and one of the things that I've started to ask members about recruitment has been a hot topic for 3, 4, 5 weeks in particular. It was really building at the start of the summer. And that's one side of the picture, the recruitment side. But are we starting to see, and you touched on it, actually you're seeing that growing number of calls around the problems with retaining staff?
Yeah.
And how quickly is that coming down the line? So there's obviously this, we've got to get more people, we've got to get more people in the business to deal with what we're facing. But how quickly is that leaky bucket going to?
Quite honestly, in our top 10 nature of advice codes, I've never seen resignation up there in the top 5. Over the past 3 weeks, it's been number 3. I think it was number 4, and then it was number 2 last week. So I think quickly, there's that feeling of COVID fatigue. People are, for want of a better phrase, knackered. And sorry to be so blunt, but it's been a hard 18 months. And when you feel so exhausted, both personally and professionally, you do deflect things, and possibly on work also. Is a change as good as a rest? Do I need to change my job? There's it's a candidate's market. Why not dip my toe in the water? Probably like many of you on here, I'm getting LinkedIn message after LinkedIn message. It's tempting for people. So I think that, well, I know from seeing it from our clients, it's coming quickly. It's happening.
So when you've got, first of all, what are the kind of questions you're being asked around resignations? Because surely that's a case of someone resigns and you've got an option to do something for them, or just accept it. What are the kind of questions that you're getting?
I think a lot of them completely out of the blue, where you think someone's satisfied and happy and it just comes out of the blue. So then it feeds into recruitment. So not so much conflict, but operational questions around how do I process it, etc. So a bit mundane really, but quite a lot out of the blue. But then there's a lot, as I touched on earlier, the grievances, there's a lot more resignations where someone is resigning and raising a grievance at the same time. So potentially you've got the risk there of constructive dismissal if they've been with you for over 2 years. I'm resigning, I've got issues with my employment, and this is the last straw. So quite complex issues around how to deal with that grievances around the vaccination position and testing and how they've been treated over the furlough period. So now it's not gone, has it? COVID has not gone, but now it's settled somewhat. I say very carefully, we're now seeing kind of the aftermath, that conflict that's been bubbling up coming through.
And you know what? And that's what I was going to ask you. What are the grievances that are coming through? Is it, that we in the past there was, real big grievances around bullying and, really poor behaviour from other people, like being horrible to other people in the business. But this feels like, from what you're saying, that actually these are grievances that have been built up over the last 18 months. Which makes it feel like it's really difficult for organisations to be able to do something now to arrest that wave of resignations.
Yeah, I think it's kind of bubbled up, over 18 months, and now there's kind of a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. People are making life decisions. How have I been treated over COVID? Did they apply furlough correctly? That whole transition from office to homework, they didn't handle that very well, and I think organisations clearly have the argument, you didn't raise it at the time, why you're raising it now? And that's a key question for any grievance where the issue is delayed in terms of raising it, because that helps you defend it at tribunal, I would stress. But, I think it's kind of straw that broke the camel's back. I'm tired, I want another job, have I been treated right? And just that feeling of frustration and exhaustion. And it's really difficult for businesses, Lee, because everyone has just tried their best to get through this. And along the way, I could probably say most businesses have had to make difficult and very quick decisions, and not always perfect ones. And maybe some of that now is getting deflected back in grievances and job transitions and job hopping. But it's definitely coming through.
That's interesting, isn't it? And it's, how does an organisation defend what's gone before? And I guess that's that's really about them having a really good look at what they're doing now, especially when looking at things like flexible working and doing right by their people.
I think flippancy is where organisations fail and see themselves in a tribunal, potentially for a high liability compensatory amount as such. It's flippancy, you know, you read it and you go, oh, what a load of nonsense. Take stock, put it down, allocate the right person to deal with the grievance who's removed and unbiased, that can spend some time on it, give it the time it deserves, full and thorough investigation with the key people. And never write a grievance outcome with any emotion behind it. Factual, evidence-based. And also, you know, try and put yourself in the person's shoes. I read a grievance by a client the other day, and it was basically saying all of this is unsubstantiated, but it was so legalistic and so cold. And I said, you can say exactly the same thing as you're saying in a completely different tone. You can refute all the allegations. You can absolutely say it's unsubstantiated, but just take a step back and read it as the recipient as such. You're going to read that and you're going to go, that's ridiculous, I'm putting in a tribunal claim. Change the language, think of the tone, write with empathy, but say the same thing. And you know, that will just help them absorb and consume the decision and maybe avoid a tribunal. The challenge with tribunals, Lee, is they're listing now for in 3 years' time, most tribunals. So they're so behind with their schedule. You know, we're seeing cases for like 2025 and stuff up in legal. And that's lingering now for all that time for both claimant and respondent. It might mean it goes away. It might mean it's just there, you know, in the back of your mind for a long period of time, but they're really behind.
Wow, that I hadn't clocked that. Actually, it's there are delays there as well, which I guess could start to see some settlements taking place earlier.
Yeah, we've changed our service because settlements have gone up. We're negotiating with the other side now on the client's behalf, as opposed to just handling the matter for them, because definitely settlements have gone up. COT3 agreements by the tribunal office, settling a case before it goes to hearing, settling on the day is happening a lot. The tribunal, for whatever reason, I can only assume they've read the papers or they think efficiency are going, parties come together and have a conversation before we get into this 5-day hearing, because there's a deal to be done here. So there's a lot of that going on.
Wow. And I mean, it's a time of turmoil. We haven't yet settled. Hopefully 2022 will start to see some settlement coming in.
I sound really doom and gloom, don't I? I hope everyone's not depressed coming off this session. There's a lot of good stuff going on as well. But yeah, it's quite a challenging period now. But then a lot of people are organising the Christmas parties now, there, Lee. So there's a positive.
Absolutely, and we could do a full loop back into Christmas parties, vaccinate or not.
Exactly, yeah. And misbehaving at Christmas parties is always a usual one we get in December.
Misbehaving, and I suspect that if that's one of the first times, just reflecting on Monday, if it's one of the first times that colleagues have got together properly to celebrate and see each other, it could be a great party.
Yeah, I think everyone's just gagging to have fun, aren't they? So yeah, people may go a little bit wild, but on a serious note, it is worth, you know, before that party happens, just reminding people of boundaries, parameters, without being a party pooper, shall we say. But it is really important, because as an employee, you're still arguably liable for the behaviour or whatever goes on at that party because you've organised it. So,
Yes.
But have fun is the important part.
Thank you so much, Kate. We're going to have to get you back in the new year, as you say. It sounds like there's going to be some new legal stances coming to light. So we'll have to get you back in the new year and have another chat. Thank you so much, Kate. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good session. Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee. See you. Bye, everyone.
So that was Kate from Peninsula, and we shall get her back. She is so full of great advice and great tips and some really practical insight into what's coming up. So thank you very much, Kate. And I'm going to move on and invite Adam to turn your camera on. Good morning, Adam. How are you?
Good morning, I'm good. How are you? How's your head?
Head is absolutely fine. Thankfully, I wasn't drinking on Monday night. It's just the throat. The throat will come back. It really will. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. And you are the Director of Sales Engineering at Citrix. And we've done a roundtable with you guys a few months ago, and I loved your approach and really having quite a conversational approach. So again, I'm going to invite people, if you've got any comments or questions, please do put them in the Q&A. Hopefully Adam has that open. But Adam, you're going to talk through the advisor experience at home and share some advice. I know you've got some great tips that you're going to share, and you've got some polls as well.
Yep.
So Adam, I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on the session this morning. Let me just share my slides, and I'm just going to make sure I'm sharing the right screen so that you're going to see my actual slides and not my presenter view. So if you just bear with me for 1 second. There we go. Lee, can you just confirm you can see the slides for me, please?
Yes, I can. They look great.
Thank you very much. So as Lee said, I am a director of UKI sales engineering. Lots of people don't really know what sales engineering are, so I tweaked my title slightly. I have an organization that reports to me, and they're really a team of technology specialists, and their job is to really understand what technology does and how we can achieve business value using that technology. So I do work for Citrix. Like Lee said, I did attend the one of the roundtables, and I think what's important just to understand from a Citrix perspective, we do have products, but really we don't really care about the products or technology. What we do care about is employee experience and how technology can really help drive outcomes. So before I carry on, I do just want to take one of the elephants out in the room down. My name, I assure you it's very easy to pronounce. If you break it down phonetically, it's Adam. The surname is just, you know, your guess as good as mine. I am also going to apologize up front because we've all been worried about COVID-19. I am currently suffering from the effects of man flu. So you could possibly witness my death at any point during this presentation. So that'll make it interesting for you, if nothing else. It's also very difficult for me to go after 3 such great kind of subject matter experts. And I can show you, I've been scribbling notes all through the session, thinking, oh, there's some really good points there that I'd love to include. But there's been some great content. But what I do want you to think about as I go through this is everything that I'm talking about is really how do we use technology to start to bring together some of the things that we've already heard talked about this morning. So we commissioned a study going back a couple of months back now about kind of the return to work, back to office, hybrid working. I'm not going to labor the points too much. I think we've all talked lots about it on lots of different webinars, lots of different seminars. We've all read a heap. We understand kind of the nuances between all of those different things. But what I did really want to call out is, whilst we kind of all in our organizations went through these different processes to think about the new normal and how we must take employees on the journey and think about leadership, what became really evident in the research that we did is the role that technology will play when we do return back to work and we do get to that definition of a new normal. And I think we all started talking about the new normal a little prematurely, because that's a phrase that was kind of used maybe 18 months ago. And the reality is I don't think we've actually got to the new normal yet. We're still working out what that looks like. And we'll talk through, as I kind of go through some of my points, how we can think about some of the things that we should use to inform our view on the new normal. But as somebody that's got 23 years technology experience, I am slightly biased in the role that I think technology will play in that. And I think we'll see that impact the whole value chain of customer experience when we start to really think about the employee experience as part of that as well. And that's kind of what we got from our, let me just move some of the things off my screen. I'm not sure if they're blocking your slides at all. When we think about that return to office, it does entirely come back down to, there are always going to be 2 components. There's going to be a physical side and a digital side. It's how do we work in these different hybrid environments? And again, we've all thought about these. I'm literally just laboring the point of we need to make sure that we understand that the technological investment is going to be, in part, if not the largest part, key to success of how we start to address all of the different challenges that we've heard about today, whether that's retention, attrition, employee experience, meeting new regulatory requirements. I believe technology is going to have a massive part to play in every step of that journey. And, you know, I've worked with Citrix, talking to lots of different organizations, many of you on this call, around kind of contact centers. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time working with Lee, and we've already seen that role of technology in the customer experience. What I want you to really start thinking about today is the most basic level of technology experience for advisors as well, because I think that's something that we often overlook. And I will walk through all of, you know, some of the nuances and some of the things that I want you to think about as we go through that. But one that I just want to highlight now is Apple. Hopefully you all are aware of Apple. I'm sure there's, you know, almost everyone on this call is using an Apple device at some point. Apple's value proposition, when you go to their website and you look at their business pages and you look at their financial reports, Apple's proposition is the product is the service, right? They don't see it as selling a product, they sell that they see a service, and that's a whole experience that wraps around that. Now, there was a study that, a report that Apple released, and it talked about how much they invested in the purchaser's experience, the consumer's experience, when they actually just took the lid off the box of a new Apple product. And if any of you have ever opened an Apple product and you grab the lid for the first time, it slides out with a really satisfactory kind of, you know, it kind of pops out nice, almost like it's hydraulic. So when we think about the ever-changing role of technology with advisors as well, actually we almost need to go down to that micro level as well and start thinking, actually we can make these huge investments, but quite often it's those micro level things that really do make a difference to a user's experience. We see that kind of across 5 key pillars. I'm not going to walk through all of these. I just wanted to start thinking about these in the context of an advisor. So when we think about IT friendly, user friendly, it's, you know, we can roll out new technologies, but if IT can't manage them, if IT don't have the scale to deliver them, if they're not going to have the security wrapped around them, and they're so complex that people can't use them, you end up in a whole heap of pain that ends up in kind of IT wastage. And that's something that we've seen in the IT world and I've witnessed for decades. So now we're starting to think, well, actually, it all has to be tied around experience, and experience has to tick all of these different boxes. So when we're now starting to think about advisors working from home, many of you will work in regulated, secure industries where maybe regulation historically has stopped people from being able to work from home. And now we've had the kind of COVID catalyst, which has said, well, actually now regulations are starting to change, or they're starting to relax in certain areas. There's new technologies that are now available. That means we can start to think about all of these different things in different ways. So I'm going to move on to kind of one of my kind of key hypotheses. We've talked for years about the workplace, that, you know, that location that we drive to, that we've made a huge investment in. We've feng shuied the hell out of the offices to make sure they're really nice places to work. And I think it was Sharon talked about kind of attrition and how we retain people. And actually one of the ways that we used to attract people was put offices in the right locations and then design those offices in really nice ways. You know, we've seen technology companies really hop on this, you know, the whole slides and, you know, double-decker buses in offices. I think they went slightly too far. But what was clear historically was the location that you went to work was a really important attractiveness factor to the recruitment process of new people coming into the organization. Nobody really wanted to go and work somewhere that they felt was really depressing. Now, we are in this new world where actually the workplace has evolved. For lots of different reasons, whether that was real estate consolidation during COVID and during lockdown, or whether it's through hybrid working or the new regulatory changes around being able to, you know, having to give people the right to work flexibly, as Kate kind of highlighted. So I think we need to shift our mindset when we think about work and stop thinking in this concept of workplace and shift to this concept of workspace. And for me, a workspace is really something that enables me to work from wherever I And that may well primarily be in the office, but it may well primarily be at home. But what's really clear is the workspace shouldn't be the thing that limits the organizations and your choices around what policies and processes you will put in place to enable people to work and meet, and start realizing the benefits of some of the things that we've talked about. My next statement, and again, I put this in deliberately to be a little provocative because I think sometimes we do have to challenge. I think that IT is becoming the new facilities management. When you look at that against the backdrop of what I just talked about, this workspace concept, everything that I historically would have engaged with my organization would have traditionally have been in a physical environment. There was a statistic that I wrote down, admittedly it is about 3 years old, but the statistic that I found was the average employee spends 67% of their time, when they're at work, 67% of their time looking at a screen. I think that's a huge number. And when you think, well, actually that was pre-hybrid work, pre-lockdown, pre-people going to work from home, when potentially that figure is going to go up because now my entire engagement with my organization is through a screen as opposed to through me turning up and being physically available on premises. So all of those things that I would have had, challenges that made me feel uncomfortable at work for, I'd have maybe have gone through facilities management. I think now, IT become, a huge part in that. So with that, I just wanted to run a poll primarily to give me a moment to have a sip on my Lemsip. But just to get us thinking about some of the things that now maybe impact how we work from home that are also technological things. So if we can, Stephen, I think you're running the poll, if you can pull it up for me, thank you. So if we could, as it says there, has anybody during this, the working from home period in the last 18 months suffered from any kind of infrastructure issue that impacts you from working from home, whether it's a power cut, phone service issues, kind of utilities, Wi-Fi, all of those things? How many of you have suffered from any of those things during lockdown? So if we just let that run for 20 seconds and then we can move on. Perfect. So I think we've let that run long enough. Yeah, look at that, a huge 82% of people have had issues that have impacted them working from home. Now, if you was in the office, there's backup generators for backup generators. Every physical location will have multiple internet links going in. And like I said, that would historically then become like a problem for facilities management. If the building doesn't work, if there's something that's physically stopping me from working, then we would go, well, actually, let's call facilities, and we'd ask facilities to get involved. Now, when I start working from home, actually, we don't always think about it in the concept of, oh, I have an internet outage or I have an electricity outage. It often comes down to, well, I can't work because I can't connect. I can't work because my laptop's run out of battery because I don't have electricity at home right now. So a lot of those outages actually now start to become real IT issues because it's the barrier between utilities and people being able to work. So I just wanted to kind of put out there just to start thinking about how working from home actually does reset some of the things that we really need to be thinking about. And kind of that segues me quite nicely into, 5 things that I often think about when we think about the advisory experience when working from home. And I'm talking about the advisory experience. This is broadly true of any person working from home, but I think there's a unique set of things that we can also think about when we think about the advisory experience working from home. And the first thing I want to think about is this concept of the branch for one. There was a trend that happened over the last, pre-pandemic, there was a trend of real estate consolidation. And that kind of happened in 2 ways. We either saw big central hubs pop up where everybody was encouraged to come to these big central hubs, or it was the satellite office approach, which was the decentralization of those big hubs and then moving to regional satellite offices. But it was still very much kind of a physical world. And in that world, everything could be centralized, and we could think about how do we manage facilities, health and safety, and that kind of in-office experience with a centralized team, with a centralized set of resources. And that was something that, you know, the world become fairly au fait at delivering. Now, when we start to think about people working from home, we're really in this world of the branch for one. And then I start to think about, well, whose responsibility is it now to think about the quality of internet connection? Whose responsibility is it if that internet connection no longer works? How do we make sure that the people working from home absolutely do have all of the technological things? And I'm not talking about, you know, have they got chairs with 5 spokes on, and have they got desks that are the right height? That will still sit somewhere between facilities and HR and line management. But from a technological perspective, who is now responsible for making sure that, you know, if somebody in your team moves, like, is the broadband going to be suitable in the new location that they're moving to? And there's these nuances, things that we need to think about that says, well, actually, we're okay with home working, but you as an individual now have to take some responsibility to make sure that you can work. And it would have been interesting, actually, to have asked Kate that question around how do HR see that responsibility? Because, you know, we saw this trend a number of years back where organizations paid for people to have internet at home if there was a need for kind of home remote working. And then we decided, well, actually, it's a utility that everybody has. So we stopped that kind of internet stipend. Now, where does all of that responsibility sit if you have a poor connection at home and someone says, well, actually, for a better connection, my organization might have to give me a stipend to support this now? And that's something that we see different organizations taking lots of different approaches to. Some are going to a stipend model. Some are using technologies to support this. And some are just putting it in contracts that says, well, we'll happily support you with your remote working, but here's what you're signing up to. But I think it's a really important thing to think about upfront that says, well, we know the outcome that we need to get to, which is people being connected when they need to be connected. Now let's define whose responsibility that is. The model that I'm seeing most kind of look towards is for certain management roles, for certain high value roles, for certain kind of subject matter specialist experts. The organization will pay for more highly available, resilient connectivity into people's homes. For everybody else, it would maybe be contractually driven. But then it's kind of, where do we shift to think more about the experience versus the outcome? I think it's very easy for us to say, hey, we've all enabled our people to work remotely from home. We went into pandemic and we made a set of choices and everybody can now work from home. But just because they have those tools available to them doesn't mean it's the right experience for them working from home. And we will talk a bit more about that through some of the other points that I've got and I'd like to raise. I think in this branch one as well, we need to start to think more about how do we get real data-driven insights and analytics into the end user performance and end user experience. From a management perspective, I can no longer see what people are doing, and technology can easily become the scapegoat for performance issues. I'm sorry I couldn't take that many calls, or I'm sorry I couldn't do those things. It's just that my performance at home was very difficult from an IT perspective, therefore it slowed me down, or I couldn't connect, the app was down. All of those kinds of things means that we're now in a world where actually having real data insights means, well, not only do I want to see, but not from a micromanagement level, but not only do I want to see what people's performance are like, but then I can directly correlate technical performance to individual performance so that we can say, well, actually, we can prove that an investment in technology does drive up individual performance. And then it's how do we deal with things like operational support? And I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Sharon that said, like, when we're onboarding people and we think about, you know, people work from home, how do we get those laptops to them? How do we manage those laptops? How do we deal with downtime if there's a problem with those laptops? How do we deal with all of the IT operational issues that comes with the task of making sure those laptops are always up to date and available for people to work on? That becomes much more complex when we're working from home. So that's where we start to kind of link some of these things together. We have to think about, well, how do we use data insights to make sure we get performance? But we can also use those same data insights to look at kind of laptop health, to look at operating environment health, to start to say, well, actually, we now can start to map some of these things to times of when we should do some of those operational support things that IT needs to do to maintain kind of good health of our environment. But it also gives us the opportunity to say, well, should we work differently? Should we start to think about breaking the construct of users directly and intrinsically linked to laptops? And again, that's something I want to touch on as we go through some of the other points that I've got here. But I think the operational support of people working from home, if we get that wrong, we don't have the real visibility into that. We can introduce a world of downtime. And I've seen it in a number of organizations I've already spoken to, that can often be used to kind of scapegoat performance issues as well. So that's something to consider. We also run a report, our Born Digital reports. These are aimed at people that have been born in the digital world and what their expectations are. And I thought this ties in quite nicely. And if you look here, only 26% of people born in the digital world would have a preference for working in the office more than they do for working outside of the office. And I think that's a huge statistic. And there is a little bit of me that's like, is this turkey's vote for Christmas? But that's because I'm 40 odd years old and I grew up in a slightly different time. But the reality is, as we start to look at, how do we bring new candidates into the workforce? Again, Kate's point, how do we bring people in and we start to use them to pipeline them from kind of their call center, contact center roles through to different roles into the organization. So it becomes a real intrinsic strategic part of talent acquisition. Well, we need to think about how people are going to work best. And we have talked about kind of that remote hybrid work already, but I thought it was interesting to put some statistics here that correlate what born digital people want versus what leaders think they want. And leaders think that, 54% of leaders think that they will want to be in the office most of the time. And there's clearly a disconnect between these things. So it's about finding that balance between what's required, what's wanted, so that you can attract and retain the very best people into your organizations. And then when you kind of break that down, again, those people born digital, and I can provide the criteria that we use to define born digital, 87% say work-life balance is important. I'd like to find the remaining 13% that don't, because I'd like to think 100% would see that that's an important balance, but 59% would prefer to continue working from home all or most of the time. I think that's that is a huge statistic. So my second point is, and it was touched on earlier, is this kind of culture. And I want to think about how technology can really support culture. I wrote a white paper on this a number of months ago about how during the pandemic, many organizations have been stripped of the tools that they use to disseminate culture throughout their organization. Culture has always primarily been driven or defined as a reaction to leadership decisions. Leaders make decisions, and then the reaction to those decisions ultimately end up defining what culture looks and feels like in an organization. If an organization, if we have leaders that are strict and rigid and say we can't work from home, the reaction to that will be we're not a very flexible organization. Now, during lockdown, we were stripped of the way that culture is often spread across an organization, and that is through peer dissemination. We go and work in an organization, we sit with people that we enjoy working with, and we have kind of micro level cultures that were defined and formed based on the macro culture of the whole organization. When we start to think about advisors working from home, communication becomes really, really important. And not just communication from a line manager perspective, but vision and strategy communication from leadership down within the organization. And it's how we communicate that becomes even more important, I think. Because if I am now somebody that works from home at least the same amount of time, if not more time than I am in the office, and therefore, and my peers are doing the same, I might not now have the ability to receive and in turn spread the culture of that organization. So communication becomes the clearest way of doing that. There's lots of different technology solutions that can tie in and support that. We're all using collaborative tools, but there's also different ways that we can present information the way that people work as well. So when they go into their workspace, they get that information put in front of them really, as part of their workflows, so that we can really reinforce all of that different culture. The other thing that we see when we start to really think about people working from home, specifically actually in contact centers, is a risk of micromanagement. This notion of we have high SLAs, one of the most metric-driven industries that I've ever worked with, and to make sure that you meet or exceed those metrics, when people are working remotely, unfortunately, it can become a process of micromanagement. And this is where I think technology can provide those data-driven insights to, using analytics to provide the information that's needed to give assurance that you are doing the right things, that people are working, that this change is going to support what the organization needs without the need for people to feel like they're being micromanaged. But I do think that same technology can then make sure that we're thinking about personal well-being. If we don't have people in the office anymore, where we don't have peers that are monitoring the well-being of those around us, that can kind of, put an arm around them, or, managers that can say, actually, I can see you're struggling. We can end up in a, and we've seen this already for the last 18 months, right? Mental well-being can, can take a real hit. And I think there's a really important role for technology to play in this. And we can use some of the real new tools like machine learning and artificial intelligence, that you can assess the way people are working to see quite how the impact that it's having on their mental well-being. I've seen lots of different technological solutions to this. And I think these are only good things where we can check in, where we can use it, first of all, for that kind of point of entrance into the organization or into the workspace, the COVID type assessment. I think it goes way beyond that, where we're starting to think about how can we monitor people, so we can say, well, actually, technology is now saying maybe they're suffering from an issue, and it can kind of put a little flag into a manager's inbox that says, maybe you should give them a call because it looks like maybe there's something going on. So I again, that's one of the considerations I would think for anybody that's kind of working from home. And I've already touched a bit on the experience that, but on this perspective, thinking about the experience on culture, if we don't have the right technological experience, when people are working from home and the only experience of their organization at that point is through technology, it doesn't really matter how great your culture is. They won't enjoy working for your organization. And because the key entry point into that is going to be poor. And that will be the foundational part of their experience of the organization culture. Because I'll say culturally, we're okay with really bad experiences. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. Going back to some of the data points that we pulled, we share these slides. This is a global report that we pulled together. But what we're looking at here is the top 3 cultural points in the UK. And that's themed as enabling autonomy, recognizing performance through remuneration, and a strong and visible leadership. So I think, again, we can see how communication and technology can play in roles 1 and 3. I wouldn't want to say that technology can really do too much about remuneration, but I thought it was quite an interesting thing to include in there. I've talked about some of these already, but kind of, in that hybrid world where we have people, are working all over the place, we need to start thinking about, how does location play a role in that? I've spoken to a couple of organizations now that are saying, actually, we are going to have kind of full work from home roles, but we're going to redefine what they are. And they're going to maybe be very different roles to the counterparts that work in the office. So it might be that roles are defined by location. What, output and process might change based on the location that people work. But we're also seeing people start to use tools that will kind of look at workflows and start to do things like group.
It would appear that Adam has frozen on us. Adam, are you still there? It would appear that Adam has frozen on us. Let's hope and pray that isn't his man flu. Adam, I'm going to assume that you are not coming back online any moment soon. So from here, I'm going to suggest that what we do is I shall ask Adam if there is any other comments or questions that he wants to pose or to ask, and we shall share his slide deck a little bit later on after this session. So arguably that was really good timing as well, because 11:45 is the time that we were planning to start the panel debate. So So Adam, thank you very much. I'm not sure if you're able to hear us, but thank you so much for sharing those insights and for getting through it with your man flu. So Stephen, please do join us on screen. You've kindly taken on the baton from me to give my voice a little bit of a rest to do our panel debate and looking at the changing face of and how organisations are adapting models. I'm going to hand straight over to you, Stephen, to introduce our panellists.
Thanks, Lee. And yes, I'm really looking forward to the next conversation. I'd like to welcome to the stage Sandra Scott, who's the HR business partner at Bupa, John Devlin, the CEO of AdSensos, and Paul Pember, head of customer services at Camden Council, my council. Welcome.
Stephen, please could you just move your microphone so we can hear you a little bit better?
How's that? Is that better?
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Lee. Hopefully you can all hear me. And welcome, Sandra, John, and Paul, three very different organizations. Very much looking forward to hearing from you in terms of what your experience has been and what your plans are in the near and longer terms. Perhaps if I could ask Sandra, if I could ask you to begin. Back at the start of the summer, Sandra, you shared with us some very comprehensive research that you'd done looking into as you were preparing for your plans for hybrid working. I wonder if, Sandra, you could just briefly recap for us what you found out back in June. What were the sort of the key takeouts from that research, and then what has changed since then, and what are your priorities now 3 months later, Sandra?
Okay, no worries. So in Bupa in May, for those who weren't on the previous session, we did some work. We created a conversation guide to help our managers hold a discussion around hybrid with our team, just to think about what it meant. It included things like, what was hybrid versus what it wasn't, the principles we wanted them to work to. We talked about hybrid in relation to what we call our 3 C's. So number 1, collaboration and cross-functional working. Number 2, creativity and innovation, and number 3, connection to teammates. So more likely coming into the office would involve those 3 C's, but equally they were valid in a different way for working at home. And all of our people managers use this guide then to work with our teams to understand what that might mean for them. We included sort of genuine topics that, like as a team, we wanted them to discuss about what if there was performance issues, what if we've got new starters, what if performance dipped. So some challenging questions that they had to consider, and they then fed those requirements back to us centrally. That brought out the areas they were concerned about. That brought out their ideal and optimum arrangement in terms of hybrid. So we definitely did not say it's 2 days here or 3 days there. We've left it to them in the consultation, but asked them to consider some of the challenging situations at the same time. So we were at the point where we were considering, getting ready for lockdown, the lifting of lockdown rather. Boris obviously announced that. But at that point, if you remember, the government was predicting infection rates of 100,000 per day. And in the insurance business in Bupa, our CEO made a deliberate decision to say, right, okay, lockdown may be lifted, but we are actively discouraging you from coming into the office, given this position. Yes, it was better with, people being jabbed and double jabbed, but our position at that point, and still is today, actively discouraging people to come in because, there wasn't an essential. Performance was working, unless there was a really good reason, unless it was better for your mental health, unless you couldn't work at home, unless you were really struggling with your performance, there wasn't really a reason to be in the office given the sort of external environment. And that's been our position all summer, Stephen. And we are currently now looking at what point we might lift that. So what we did with that data was we started to sift out where we had problems, where people were concerned, what they were struggling with. So there was a sort of few topics that we've developed some materials around. One is inclusion, the other one is leadership, the third one was well-being, and you've heard some of this being talked about earlier. And then just last week, we've ran what we called a Getting Ready to Go Hybrid series of events, a whole week. I think there was about 30 of them. covering a range of the topics that they told us they were less confident in. So again, like in our organisation, as I'm sure like many, we threw out Teams, we use Teams, but do we really know all the nuances of what it can and can't do? Info security was another area. We've had our behavioural psychologists doing sessions around behaviour change, changing of habits, there's stuff around well-being. So for us, we're still got the pause button pressed just now, but looking forward and agreeing a plan for how we change that going forward. Back to you, Stephen.
Sandra, thank you so much. I've got a few questions for you, which I think I'll wait to pose them, and we'll hear from Paul and John first. And I just want to remind everybody listening in as well, if you have any questions, do feel free to use the Q&A functionality, and we'll make sure to pose your questions to our panel today. So thanks for that, Sandra. We'll come back to you in just a tick, but first I'd like to welcome Paul. So Paul, just down the road from me, in Camden City Council, you have a different set of challenges. How's your experience been, and what are your sort of key strategies moving forward?
Good morning, Stephen. Yeah, so Paul Pember, Head of Customer Services at Camden Council, and like many of you, since January, we've been starting to kind of plan hybrid working and what that means for us. And quite early days, we, kind of wrote off full-time home working as a place-based organisation. We knew that actually being at home full-time or having team members in Scotland or North Wales wouldn't really work for people of Camden. So that was our first starting point, was we didn't want to go down the route of full home time working. But then saying that, it's actually worked really well for us over the last 18 months. So for a short-term period, it's worked for us, but we didn't see that being a long-term game for us. And it wasn't really until June we really started to focus on hybrid working, as the world started, to kind of reopen back in June. We then started to think, right, now is the time to start thinking about what our plan is. So one of our first steps was to form a working group, and this working group was a blend of different roles in my service, so whether it was team managers, coaches, trainers, advisors. There was about 6 of them, and they met in June 2 or 3 times, and we kind of posed some big questions for them to ask. So questions such as what's worked really well in the last 18 months, what maybe hasn't worked so well, what activities are best suited in the office, and how are you going to make hybrid working work? And that was a really important first step, because it kind of, we heard their voices and we heard their ideas. And one of the big takeaways was there were so many different ways we could play it. So essentially we brought all that back to the table, and we're currently doing a pilot that started last week. But essentially we've got a mixed bag of flexible working plans. So we've got 3 of them. So the first one is around about 75% of our workforce, and that is 1 day in the office per week, avoiding Mondays. So Mondays is our busiest day. Our demand is about 25% higher compared to Tuesday to Friday. So we don't think there's any point in terms of asking people to come in on a Monday where they're really busy. They don't get a chance to chat to their, kind of team. So we thought, actually, let's have that day as a home working day. So it was 1 day between Tuesday and Friday. And then the second plan is office-based. And that's for 2 reasons. One, I've got face-to-face services in my team, and naturally they can't be done at home. And also we've got people that do want to be in the office every day. Obviously we're in Camden, we're in London, it's not cheap. We've got people that live in house shares. So we've got people that would rather be in every single day. And then we've got a third plan that we are trialing for the next 3 to 6 months. And that plan 3 is that we're creating permanent home working roles between 10 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. So that for us is a real pinch point in terms of we've got breaks, we've got lunches, we've got one-to-ones and team meetings. So we wanted to attract a different type of person, and therefore we are going to trial, I think we're going to trial 3 or 4 permanent home working roles between 10 and 2:30. So that's what we've gone for. I will kind of say that I don't think this is going to be perfect. We are really going to just say, look, let's trial this, let's test and learn and tweak. And I see that being, the case for the next 3 to 6 months. Test, learn, tweak, gain feedback, and hopefully by January we'll be in a place where something's more settled. So yeah, that's our plan at Camden.
Thanks so much, Paul. I've got some questions as well, which I'll come back to you in just a tick. But first of all, welcome to you, John. And I imagine, John, you'll probably have a slightly different perspective on hybrid. Where are you at now with the census?
Yeah, hi, Stephen. The first thing I would say is that work from home works, and we identified that very early in the process that work from home was working for a huge number of our colleagues. More than 80%, still say that their preference is to work from home. We regularly do that pulse check, and the needle hasn't changed much over the last 18-month period. We have colleagues who prefer working at home, colleagues who prefer the office environment, and a bit of a hybrid in the Venn diagram as well, of those who enjoy working between office and home. Pretty consistent with what the other panelists and what Adam spoke about earlier. The other challenge that we had, however, was continuing to grow and scale during the pandemic and the work from home environment. And we've onboarded, recruited over 1,000 colleagues in that period. And we had to identify solutions that allowed us to mobilise that work from home team, to engage with them, to collaborate with them, but also to continue to scale up and grow. And one way in which we approached that, one way of a huge array of tools we had to deploy, was the concept of a Census Local, which was creating a series of small community hubs in rural, semi-rural locations across the UK, to allow our work from home colleagues to have a base in their community, have a base in their town. And we've opened 2 so far out of the 6 that we're planning. Town centre hubs, small footprint, onboarding locations, recruitment locations, training centre, but essentially a place that colleagues can meet and collaborate, meet their manager, meet their colleagues periodically. They can choose to continue working from home, or if they're in the town that day, they can plug in the office. And it's like Adam was saying earlier, it's that workplace over workspace kind of dynamic, and we are very progressive in terms of investing into that model. Now we see the success of it. We see how engaged, how our colleagues collaborate in that environment. And it also means that the local community buys into the employer in town, which is hugely important if you are recruiting people who maybe live hundreds of miles away from your traditional, conventional office spaces. So that's one way in which we are changing the dynamic of the hybrid approach to working from home, is by the delivery of the local hubs in small towns based around the UK.
Thanks, John. That's really interesting. It's the first time I've heard of this idea of creating these local hubs, which almost feels like it's like a third place. It's not quite the office, it's not quite home. It's a hybrid of both that you've created, and it's really interesting and quite innovative. Are you mandating colleagues to come into those hubs in any way, or is it completely their choice?
It's their choice, unless there is obviously retraining, a need for the teams to come together. But clearly we can still train remotely, as we've been doing for the majority of our work from home colleagues through the pandemic period. And that will continue to be the case. But as you say, this adds a different dimension to it. It allows colleagues to have that choice. It also allows them to be far more flexible, that if they are in the town for a dental appointment, a doctor's appointment, even doing their local shopping, they can come into the hub, plug in, and get going. And it just allows them that flexibility, to pick and choose the times of day that they want to work, without us mandating time of day or place of work. It's your choice when you can make yourself available.
It's really struck me how Sensos is probably one of the best examples of providing a level of autonomy, and Adam talked about that, the desire for autonomy and flexibility, and I think you're very far ahead in doing that. And another example of that is your commitment to remote recruitment and training. I would say the majority of leaders I've talked to have said it's very, very difficult, and in fact a number of have said we just don't do it. We found it too hard. We cannot recruit and onboard remotely. We have to bring people into the office to do it. Even permanent remote workers need to come in for the first few weeks to be onboarded. So what's the secret of a Sensos' success? What have you managed to do that perhaps others haven't yet done?
Well, I think first of all, you have to shake off all those legacy mentalities that limit your thinking about what can be achieved and what can't be achieved. I think when you're faced into having to mobilise large-scale work from home across 4 or 5 countries that we operate now, all with different sets of rules and regs around about pandemic and virus control, etc., then you have to kind of open your mind to new ways of working. You can't say that doesn't work for me. I think you have, as Adam said in his presentation, you have to look at the colleagues you're hiring now, what their expectations are, not what John needs, not really what the Sensos leadership team need, but what the customer-facing colleagues need to deliver the job to their best ability. So that's what we've basically done. We turned the structure and the pyramid upside down and made sure their leadership team were there to support the customer-facing colleagues, not the other way around. We also brought in technology. It allowed us to do that. We invested quite heavily and re-engineered the processes from inside out, upside down, back to front, really, in terms of making sure we had the collaboration platforms and the collaboration tools that allowed us to recruit, assess, onboard remotely. So it was a mentality change. It would have been easy for me to also say that doesn't work for me or for a Sensos, that will never work. We need everyone to come into the office for training. But we had to kind of overcome some of those blockers that were there, and kind of have a paradigm kind of shift, about what the future of contact centres, home working, and I guess the future of a Sensos looks like.
It's clearly working, as evidenced by your gold award on Monday night as the leading large outsourced contact centre. Just one more question before I move on to a question for Sandra. John, is you talked about bringing team leaders together with advisors in hubs. Does that mean that you tend to group, the way you organise your specific teams, you tend to group them, you still tend to group them by geography to ensure that they can physically meet where necessary?
Yeah, we tried not doing that. We tried to make it virtual in terms of your relationship with your manager, but that human-to-human contact between a manager and their colleagues is vital. People work for their manager. I know they work for the business, they work for the brand, but first and foremost, they have to work for their manager. So yes, we reverted back to having local managers in the local hubs, and again, to build that sense of team spirit, team culture, team focus on the community. It was important that we hired those managers locally as well, and we didn't parachute them in from head office, let's say. So that's what, again, been very, very successful.
Thank you, John. So Sandra, over to you, and really interesting to hear Bupa's journey and your commitment. I think it reflects on sort of Bupa's mission and values as a health-orientated organisation to take the health first approach. I guess the question, Sandra, is: have you actually now set a date? Is it still something that's fluid, or have you now actually set a date when you're going to be launching your new model?
So no, we haven't set a date. We've always said it would be Q4, but we didn't set a specific date. So what I'm doing at the minute is basically drafting a story so far for our CEO with date, with evidence that sort of confirms how many of our people have been impacted by COVID through the summer, and then almost like that phased approach to how we would move to it, most likely starting with our bigger contact centres coming back first. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting times for us. And I think it was you, Paul, one of the things for us is, we are definitely pitching this as it is a big, long year's worth of experimentation. And it's getting our managers comfortable with, we'll try some things and they might half work, but other stuff might not. And just all getting comfortable with that concept of experimentation for us. Yeah, because we won't get it all right all the time.
And is there going to be some sort of a trigger point? When will you know the time is right?
So at the minute, all we want to do is just look at, the sort of infection rates and what happened over the summer. Obviously, the whole external environment is improved in many ways. So it's just really getting the nod from our CEO, and then obviously there's things like half term will be coming up soon, Christmas will be coming up soon. So it's how we weave all of that into what it is we do. We've outlined our plans, we've talked quite a lot about it, and now it's just giving everybody that nudge to say with effect from this date, and then having the checks and balances in place that looks at what happened when we took our ops contact centre back. What were the problems there? How can we learn from that for when we do the next one? So it's just this natural evolution. It's not like we've got a typical milestone plan with dates and we're all stuck to that. It's not like that at all, Stephen. It's just learning as we go, which is a bit uncomfortable because it's unclear in other ways as well.
I think we've all become accustomed, haven't we, in the last 18 months to operating in a certain amount of fluidity.
Yeah.
The situation changes so quickly and it continues to change. That is the so-called new normal, I think.
Yeah.
I think certainty is something that we shouldn't expect and can't expect. We've heard some examples already of different ways to structure hybrid working. So Paul has some quite clear structures, 1 day a week at home, not on Mondays. Do you have any such plans in terms of how, when people still do eventually come back to the office, how you will structure that? How many sort of do certain teams need to come in together? Are there certain days where you're asking people to come in? How will it work?
So we have, if I talk about our non-contact centre people, with them it is most definitely, their purpose in coming back is likely to be new projects, not met people, team related, as and when, rather than a 1 day a week. Obviously anybody who wants to be in the office 5 days a week can be in the office 5 days a week. So we're not saying people can't come back. But for our contact centres, we ended up in a position where we had sort of quite a different, one group wanted to do it one way, another group wanted to, and they were vastly far apart. And again, we didn't want to be prescriptive, but we had such a different view, from hardly any time at all to quite a lot of time in the office. And so we've got them to a place now where we'll do it differently. So how we do it, but more likely for us, it's going to be a day a week for our contact centre people.
In the office.
And that will be about team connection, purpose, face-to-face collaboration, because when they're in, we want to make the most of what that looks like, the connection to the wider team, their colleagues, the purpose of the organisation, as well as make sure they're okay. So that's what it's likely to be, but how that manifests itself could be slightly different depending on the contact centre.
Thank you, Sandra. Paul, back to you. I was really interested by your opening comment that you realised up front that it wasn't going to work for Camden to have people not from Camden, or people from very disparate parts of the country working in the or operating. And I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit and sort of your thinking. What does it mean? Because this is interesting, the idea of having local people for local people. Because on the other hand, we've also heard more and more contact centres are looking to recruit from a wider catchment. As a local council, you've made a decision consciously to focus on local resourcing. What's the rationale?
Yeah, so I think it's worth kind of saying at the start that normally I'm very insight focused and insight driven. Stephen should be happy to know that. But for us, it was a bit of a gut feel. So, there's no proof or insight from, people that live in Camden to say they want to be served by people who are from Camden. But we need to have people that I think care and understand the borough. And I think some of our services you could probably get away with not being from Camden, but there's other ones such as housing, where if someone's talking about a road and that person has never been there or can't even picture it, I think the experience is not as good. And I think you just need to have that level of care and that level of interest in a borough. So it was more of a gut feel rather than based on any insight or any surveys. And maybe that will change. At the moment, we don't have any issues in hiring people. That is not a issue for Camden. When we advertised 3 roles last year, we had 850 people going for it. So we feel that actually we can have people from Camden or kind of near Camden. But if that's an issue in the future, we might have to, kind of revisit that.
Thanks, Paul. And I'm also interested to understand the thinking behind having more of an office presence. We've heard the other sort of approach from John, which is really embracing the remote piece and giving individuals a huge amount of autonomy, and that clearly works really well for a census. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, there is no right answer for everybody. Everybody has a different context and a set of circumstances. What are those circumstances in Camden that make it more appropriate for people to be in the office more of the time?
So just to make it clear, we're doing 1 day in the office and the rest of the days at home. So Mondays will be at home, and then between Tuesday and Friday, you pick one of those days. Similar to what Sandra said, there's a bit of magic that happens in person. On kind of Monday night, it sounds like you knew what that was. There's a bit of magic that you can't do virtually, and that's one of the big reasons why we're saying 1 day a week in the office. So you have time with your team, you can meet your team, you can chat to your line manager, you can have a kind of team huddle in person. There's a bit of magic sometimes that happens in person, and we felt 1 day a week was fine. And it also just means that 1 day a week they're coming into Camden, and we're definitely going to start thinking about over the next 3 months, what things can we do, what themes can we have every few weeks to re-engage people in the borough and to make sure they understand what's happening across the organisation.
Thanks, Paul. I'll ask you this in the first instance, but I'll open up to Sandra and John afterwards as well. Do we think 1 day a week is going to be the norm, or over time, is that likely to go to 2 or even 3 days a week in the office?
Yeah, I'm really hopeful that it will work. When we did our staff survey, I think 65% of people opted for 2 days in the office and 3 days at home. So I think there's an appetite from people to come in. They do want to come in. They do want to see people. I think only 5% of people surveyed said they didn't ever want to come back to the office. So that means 95% of people do want to have some kind of office presence. And I think the earlier point, and I can't remember her name, but she talked about the fact that in the winter, actually people might not want to come in on certain weeks. And I think we need to be that flexible. I don't think we should be so set on it has to be a day a week. I think that's got to be our guide, and that's what we're going to aim for. But I think we need to flex based on what's happening around the world. For example, the petrol crisis we're in now. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that 1 day a week will be enough, but there might be certain times if there's something happening in the organization, you might ask them to come in 2 days for 4 weeks. But I think there needs to be a real purpose, and the why needs to be there so people understand why they're traveling in. And in London, it can be a real pain to travel in. So if they are, we need to tell them why.
Thanks, Paul. John and Sandra, same question to you both. Is it going to stay at one day a week for the foreseeable, or are we hoping, do we want it to go up over time? Will it go up?
I think for us, Stephen, it differs by location and really by the colleague's choice as well. As Paul was saying there, in London, our operations in Bucharest, some of our colleagues would typically have commuted for an hour maybe on public transport, maybe more than an hour in public transport to get to our kind of office. Bucharest, a very populated, congested city, and public transport is good, but it still takes you some time to travel across the city. So the guys there are in no hurry to come back to the office, as you would rightly expect. But in some of the smaller locations, when our colleagues are maybe they live in a small town and they're only a 10-minute walk from the hub, then I can probably see them spending more time in the hub than they would do in a metropolis or a capital city type location that Paul has in London or we have in Bucharest. So I think it's like everything else at the moment, it's coming down to fitness for purpose, choice, flexibility, empowerment, enablement, and in a lot of that, the power has shifted quite dramatically to the employees in all of that space. Paul makes a great point. In the UK, we've got a bit of a fuel crisis on at the moment. So thank our lucky stars, we're not all driving up and down motorways to travel in and out of offices at the moment. It's every cloud has a silver lining. And I think these kind of things, people are now getting used to it, in the same way that typically large-scale contact center offices that we all have operated needed very strong business continuity, resilience plans in case of power outages or utility issues. Some of that now is de-risked by the fact that you have 1,000 colleagues spread across 1,000 little contact centers in their homes. So I think it does come down to choice and what works in that particular location.
Thank you, John. Sandra, do you think it will stay at 1 day? Do you see it going above?
I agree with Paul and John. I think there's a number of things that will play out here. A day seems like a good result for now, and as I've said, for us, it is sort of see what that delivers. See how much change is going on in the contact centre. That it has typically for us been easier if it's face to face. So that might be a thing where we want people to come in, for a little bit longer. But the other thing I think that plays out is the sort of demographic of your workforce and the type of role that they do. So, certain groups definitely want to be more at home, certain groups want to be more in the office, and that's fine. If that their preference absolutely can be factored into that. But also the type of worker, in our organisation, our salespeople like being more face to face than remote, but that's not true for 100% of that population. So it's all of those dynamics playing in, and then it feels like we've got another lever to play, to play with here around, all your typical metrics that you'd be looking at. What does this one do to all the other metrics, whether it's engagement, productivity? How do we turn that up and down? So we get the optimum measure of all of them.
Thank you. Just bear with me for a moment while I struggle with my headset. Thank you. Let me open up the question for all three of you. There's some anecdotes flying around of people going back to the office and just spending all day on Zoom. And that's it may be a one of those made up media stories, but how do we I think there is an important point underneath all of this. We want to give our colleagues flexibility and autonomy. We want to let them decide their own agendas, and at the moment we're looking at 1 day in the office a week. But if we want people to be with people and everyone's in on a different day, and we all know that we have a lot of calls every day, how do we get the balance right between giving people the flexibility but also making sure that they're in at the same time as other people, so that the magic can happen? Does there need to be a certain amount of mandating? Actually, we'd like, if you are part of this work group, we want you all to come in on this day. How do we manage that?
Yeah, first of all, guilty as charged of going to the office and sitting on Zoom all day. It's a I don't think it is just an urban myth. I think that certainly does exist. So yeah, we have to kind of be careful about that we don't just fall into that trap. We are when we're working on projects together, Stephen, I am making sure that our teams come into the office to get that creative spark when we're working on projects together, or sessions that we have, in terms of strategic outline, and roadmaps we're working on. We make sure that on a Friday, typically, myself and our kind of leadership team, our kind of senior team, let's say, are working together in the office, to make sure we get that creative spark. So I think to some degree you have to mandate that. Otherwise, you will rock up at the office and you'll be the only person there, and you'll just sit on Zoom all day, and as you would do at home, and it's a bit of a pointless commute in that case. So I do think you have to work at making sure people are back in the office, and getting that creativity and that collaboration going.
Thanks.
One of the beauties of the contact centre organisation is the planning team. So we are going to use them, Stephen, to help us with this, to ensure, like we have had stories of, not so much in the contact centre space, but some of my colleagues have made if I use London as an example, made the horrendous commute to London because they've been fed up at home. No one else is in. It's really lonely and really boring. So you may as well have done the same thing at home, so they've not done it again. And I think you do that once and you tend not to do it again, because it is a complete waste. So certainly in the contact centre space, we're hopeful. We've been talking to the planning team about, Paul, you used the word magic, because that's what we want. When we've got them in, we want to maximise that opportunity. We probably won't mandate all of the team in every single week, but certainly for some of that time we want all of the team in, because we want that magic.
Thank you.
And Stephen, I'll just build on John's point there. I think it is about understanding which meetings are better in person and which meetings are virtual meetings. And I think there's probably something that we all need to do, is just look at those diaries over the next month and start to label, kind of which meeting is what. So I think the takeaway is that we need to be much more organised and forward thinking than we probably have been before.
Just staying on the point of organisation and planning, we have a question from Abby. So Abby asks, is anyone trialling split shift options for remote teams? I know of a few contact centres that have introduced split shifts. Is this something on any of your radars, John?
Yeah, we've definitely got that. It's one of the benefits of work from home, one of the benefits of that community hub approach we're taking, that we're allowing some of our advisors, to work kind of the peak hours, between 9 and 12, let's say, have 3 hours off to go and do what they need to do, and maybe even collect the kids from school, etc., and then come back on later in the day and do some hours at that point as well. So it does allow you to do that in a way that beforehand you could offer split shifts, but it meant your colleagues travelling in and out of the office twice a day. No one realistically is going to do that, are they? But I think working from home or working in a more hybrid hub way allows colleagues to benefit from split shifts.
And if you can do it, not everybody can do it, but if you can offer split shifts, this is another potential strategy in recruitment, to offer busy parents, for example, who need to do the school runs twice a day, the options to work, for a 4-hour shift at the times that suit them, when other roles don't offer that level of flexibility. I want to move on to another question, just thinking about the uncertainty, and of course, while most of us are by now vaccinated, there still continues to be a significant number of new infections every day. And I want to ask, how are you going to be reassuring your people about coming back to the office, people who understandably may have some concerns about sitting in premises for hours surrounded by other people? What steps are you taking to provide that reassurance of the safety of coming back to premises?
So for us, I mean, it's we've got the benefit of being a healthcare organisations and having lots of clinicians, so we're using them, Stephen, to inform. We have done all the way through the pandemic, inform our approach, what we do, what we don't do, heavily based on clinical advice, which absolutely helps bring credibility to our workforce. But just listening to what those concerns are and trying to understand where they're coming from and what we can potentially do about it as well.
Could you give some more specifics, possibly, Sandra? What sort of advice and guidance can you offer, which is then validated by the professionals?
So we absolutely have followed government advice as a minimum all the way through. Example more recently was obviously Boris said, "Oh, we don't need masks," right? We didn't do that. We absolutely, in our offices today, if someone comes in, as they come in, as they go out, and as they move around, not whilst they're sat, but if someone's in the office, we are still using masks. And a lot of that isn't because we feel necessarily that we need to, but a lot of that's about confidence and security. So, when you listen to what the government were saying, when you listen to what other companies are doing, when you listen to the fears and insecurities of our own people, and then you talk to the clinicians about what will or won't help, absolutely the position we landed on was we are keeping masks in certainly in our UK insurance contact centres offices for just now. So we've still got that in play.
Thanks. Paul?
So yeah, we've done two things to help. The first thing is that we did a 2-week pilot and we're on week 2 now. And we've got about 3 people in per day just to try out the space. That's really helping because they've had a really good first week and therefore they're telling stories to their team members about actually it was fine, the tube wasn't as busy, the office is okay. So that's hopefully going to help reassure people that actually it's okay. And number 2, we have got kind of cleaning workstations on, kind of each part of the office. So, they can get their anti-bac. So we're just doing things like that just to reassure them. But I think just kind of telling the story and not pushing. And I think the fact that we also did virtual drop-in sessions during August. So team members could come and chat to the working group and kind of ask any questions they had. So I think it's about just being really open and just always talking to your staff really helps.
Thank you so much. That is all the time that we have. Thank you so much to you, Sandra, to John and Paul for sharing your stories. I wish you all the luck with what's to come, and hopefully we'll start bringing people back to the office and seeing the magic happen again. Thank you again. Back to you, Lee.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, Sandra, John and Paul. That was a really fascinating debate. And for those of you that have been wondering, we will be sharing the recordings on a landing page that we are in the process of creating that's for all of the hybrid working events that we have done over the summer. This has brought our hybrid working series to a close. But as I say, all of that content is still there. And we will continue to have these conversations. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to all of our speakers and presenters today. Stephen, for stepping in last minute there for me in the panel debate, but also to Sharon, to Kate, to Adam, to Sandra, John and Paul. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great afternoon and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.